Okay, thank you.
All right. Christina Brown from Edgartown.
Here.
Jeff Agnoli from Edgartown.
Here.
Fred Hancock from Oak Bluffs.
Here.
Peter Wharton representing the county.
Here.
Ben Robinson representing Tisbury.
Here.
Trip Barnes
No.
from Tisbury.
Here.
Ernie Thomas, West Tisbury.
Yep.
Doug Cedarholm from West Tisbury.
Here.
Linda Sibley, West Tisbury.
Here.
Okay, I thought I heard
No.
Linda. Jim Veracruz from Aquina.
Yes, here.
Kathy Newman from Aquina. Okay, I didn't see Kathy. Michael Kim, representing the governor. No. Brian Smith, Oak Bluffs.
Here.
Greg Martino, Tisbury.
Here.
Kate Putnam, Edgartown.
Here.
Chairman Joan Malkin, Chilmark.
Here.
Did I call Jay Grossman from Chilmark? I don't know that I did.
No.
Jay Grossman,
Are you
Chilmark.
here?
Here. Yes.
Hi, Jay. Okay.
Hey,
Okay,
I wanted to say to Kate, she should tilt her camera down. We're only getting the top of her head. Oh, well, she sat up more.
that's perfect. Tonight's agenda, Mashakit Commons, which is an Edgartown DRI. It's a public hearing. We have 3 public hearings tonight. Still Point Meadows, which is in West Tisbury, also a public hearing, and 43 Look Street in Tisbury, which is a demolition. Public hearing is to enable the applicant to make a presentation if they choose, to enable the commissioners to ask questions, to the public to participate and ask questions so that we can develop a full record. So that's what's going to happen with the first 3 items on the agenda. The next item is a written decision, approval of a written decision, approving it if it is in accord with the oral deliberation. That's the Vineyard Wind Maintenance. There are a whole bunch of people that aren't eligible to vote on that decision. That would be Tripp, Kathy, Kate, Peter, and myself. And although probably technically I could handle the written decision without commenting, because I'm not eligible to vote, I have asked Jim Veracruz if he'd be willing to take that on. The last item on the agenda is no longer on the agenda. It was the 1133 Main Street demolition. If you've looked at the agenda online in the last half hour or so, it's been scratched. It's being postponed until next week to enable staff to finalize some of the edits. So we have 4 things on tonight. The approving the written decision should be reasonably straightforward, Doug. So I don't know how much time you need to save for that, but 3 public hearings. Next meeting agenda is next week, followed by, sadly, the 22nd of September. It's kind of a big night. The new lane cell tower modification, Airport Road cell tower, that's a concurrence review. The first one is a modification. It's a change to an already approved DRI. 22 Daggett Road is in Tisbury. It's a demolition, and that's also a concurrence review. So it comes to the commission to decide if we're going to hear it or not. The Vineyard Wind helicopter hangar, which is a written decision. The New England Wind connector cable, another written decision, and also 1133 Main Street. So there are 3 written decisions. They usually don't take very long. 2 concurrence reviews and a modification review next week. Adam, do you have some things that you would like to bring to our attention?
Yes, I would, and I'll try to be quick. Just wanted to compliment Sherry Cassell. I don't know if she's here. We completed since I've been here, our annual survey of water quality in island ponds. We basically survey 13 and now 14 island ponds, all the MEP ponds, in many different locations. We survey them 4 times a year, and we have created quite a record of water quality that we can use. We're also, that dovetails right in to our Up Island 208 planning, which we just completed all of the existing conditions report. We're working on the technology. The third step will be to match the potential nitrogen reducing techniques with the water quality analysis that we've done. And the fourth will be to come up with a plan and try to get that funded and clean up the ponds.
Can I just interrupt you for a second?
Sure.
So I know Linda's the kind of person who usually raises this. Adam talked about a 208 plan.
Yeah.
The Down Island towns have what's known as comprehensive waste management plans. The Up Island towns don't have sewer systems. So they, Adam is working with the commission to have a comparable plan dealing with septic waste on the Up Island towns.
Right. We're not doing it by town. We're doing it by water basin. And we'll basically, because the boundaries are of the basin. We're also working the tribe on that. And they've done a great job as well. And that leads into, you know, we still continue to work with the county on our ARPA funding, which is basically to put nitrogen reducing systems in different locations around the island. You know, we've been working, it's very complicated in terms of the money, in terms of other kinds of things, but we continue to work on that. And I think with the All Island Pond, the All Island health agents, I think we'll get there in the next month or so. We're working on revising the open space and the harbor management plan for Edgartown, which is two interesting projects, and we're really working hard on those. We did get a SNEP grant as part of our work with the University of New Hampshire. We're going to put a PRB, a second PRB in Oak Bluffs. We did a first one, both on Lagoon Pond. We did the first one in Tisbury. We are also looking at, you know, Bill has been working with a consultant. It's called Streetlights. It basically matches anytime a ping off a cell phone comes in, it matches it where it is. So you can really look at road lengths. It doesn't tell you what or who, it just tells you, you know, that it happened, and it gives you a general location. So that's really cool technology. We really can look at traffic length, trip lengths, and timing and all kinds of things. Go along with Mike Morrow, who did our traffic counts this year, did an incredible job looking at specific areas, and then Dan looking at our permanent counts, and we hope to do more. Finally, this year, we're also going to update our school profile, which we did in 2019, which had, you know, virtually everything. So we've had a busy summer, and we are basically we're in the office 3 days a week. We're going to go to full time in January, assuming that there's no health issues. So that's my report.
And I just want to remind commissioners, Adam made mention of this maybe a month ago, that on October 22nd, we are planning on having a commissioner day to look to the future and to begin to look at what our kind of big picture planning is going to be for the next 20 years. Won't be that specific, but the idea is for all of us to get together in person and look to the future and try to make some concrete plans and ideas for how we intend to, what we intend to spend our energies on. So put it in your diaries, please, October 22nd. It will be
8:30, it starts at 8:30.
yeah, an almost full day event.
It's not a cocktail.
30 on a Saturday. Oof.
Well, there's the first complaint. Let's see, who else has a complaint? Thank God, only you, Doug. All right, well, anyway, look,
Just gotta do
the complainer gets all the attention. Over to you, over to you.
So just for the record, Kathy Newman's here. So hi, Kathy.
Great, hi Kathy.
Hey.
Okay, we have 3 public hearings tonight. We have about 2.5 hours to allocate to the 3 of them. All 3 of them are going to be reached tonight. And so there may be a requirement to continue some of the, all three at some point. We'll see. But I am going to probably have to, if there's a lot of public testimony, I may have to limit the length of public testimony. But everyone who wants to speak will have an opportunity. Okay, first one is Mashakit Commons. I'll read the public hearing notice. The public is invited to a public hearing concerning the following development of regional impact, DRI number 734, Mashakit Commons 40B. The applicant is Affirmative Investments. Craig Nicholson is the agent, and Island Housing Trust. The location is 38 Mashakit Road, Edgartown, map 28, lot 225, a 6.76 acres. The proposal, 40B development with 36 affordable rental units and 4 ownership units. Date and time, Thursday, September 8 at 7:05 p.m. Place, online Zoom. The meeting ID and password are in the public hearing notice, which is posted on our website. The application and plans are available for public inspection on the MVC website at mvcommission.org. Written testimony may be submitted prior to or during the hearing. Anyone who wishes to attend the hearing is urged to review the MVC's public hearing protocols at our website, mvcommission.org/public hearing protocols. In order to provide oral testimony during the hearing, it is encouraged for individuals to pre-register by sending an email to Lucy Morrison at morrison@mvcommission.org. This hearing is held in accordance with Section 14 of Chapter 831 of the Acts of the Commonwealth of 1977 as amended, and Chapter 38 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth as modified by said Chapter 831. This public hearing will be conducted exclusively using remote conference technology in accordance with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. The applicant, interested parties, and the public may attend the meeting using one of the following methods: using an internet-enabled device with a camera and a microphone, and the link is on the public hearing notice, or using a telephone, and the telephone number, meeting ID, and password are on the public hearing notice. As the public hearing notice indicates, this is a 40B for members of the public who may not know what that means. Chapter 40B of the general laws provides for developers to seek a comprehensive permit from the zoning board of appeals in the town where the project is located. And it's comprehensive in that all permits for the project come from the ZBA. They don't have to go to other town entities for town-based permits. That's independent of and after the Martha's Vineyard Commission completes its public hearing on the DRI and makes a determination. Then it goes to the town and the comprehensive permit process begins. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. I'm going to ask Alex, but wait, first I'm going to let Christina Brown say something.
Thank you. I'm going to be abstaining from participating in the Mashakit review. I did the same thing when the commission reviewed the Morgan Woods project, and it seemed like the best way to handle my being on 2 boards at once. So thank you.
So Christina is recused from deliberating and participating on this. Jim, you have your hand up.
I also am going to recuse myself because I have a family member who works with Island Housing Trust and is a planner on this project. So I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you. Okay, Alex, would you please give us an overview of the project and identify the planning concerns, and then we will turn it over to the applicant to make its presentation.
Okay. So the applicant in this case is a partnership between Affirmative Investments, Inc. and Island Housing Trust, going as Affirmative IHT. Doug mentioned the 40B development aspect. I'll go through the basic project and some updates since the LEPC meeting. LEPC looked at this at the end of August and voted 8-0 to recommend concurrence. They also voted to authorize a peer review of a traffic memo that had been provided. So I'll summarize that. After that meeting, the applicant opted to go straight to a hearing. So that's what we're doing today. So the new information since LUPC includes responses from the applicant to questions that were raised by commissioners. Those are in the record. I sent those out a few days ago. They've addressed questions, including clarifying that short-term rentals won't be allowed. More information about how the site was laid out, including the goal of maximizing community, sense of community, and other features, which I'll summarize, and then the traffic peer review letter. So just a quick overview. This is the project site at 38 Meshacket Road in Edgartown. Closer view. It's currently undeveloped. It's a lot that's owned by the town. The project we're looking at now is the result of a request for proposals that the town put out last year. The town's also dedicated significant CPA, Community Preservation Act funds to the project. And this site was actually mentioned in the Edgartown Housing Production Plan as a possible site for affordable housing. The town also owns the lots to the east and north. This is the old town dump. And then the lots to the south are the Meeting House Way lots, which were previous DRI. So I've gone through the project history. The proposal is to develop affordable housing on the lot. There'll be 36 rental units and 4 homeownership units with a total of 78 bedrooms. We'll look at the site plan and the elevations. The project area would be only 6.76 acres of the 8.5 acre site. The rest, so the 6.7 acres would be leased to the applicant, and then the rest would be retained by the town. There would be income restrictions on all of the units, including between 30 and 100%, 110% area median income in terms of household income qualifications for the rental units. And the ownership units would be restricted to between 90 and 120% area median income. There are 3 different housing types proposed on the site. The ownership units would be 2 duplex buildings, and then there would be other 3-unit and 6-unit buildings around the property, which we'll see. So this is the basic site plan. You can see access is from Meshacket Road, loops around a common green area. This building here would be a common building for mail and gathering spaces and other things with the bike shelter. And then, so these units on the side here are the 3-unit buildings. And then you've got the duplex units here, and then the 6-unit buildings are these 4 orange buildings. We'll come back to that. I'll just go through the planning concerns that staff has discussed with the applicant. So in terms of wastewater, the project is in the Edgartown Great Pond watershed. That's considered impaired. The development will be connected to the town sewer, but mitigation would still be required for the amount of nitrogen generated that's not taken out by the sewer. The town has approved the required wastewater flow for the sewer connection. We've worked with the applicant a little further since LEPC to refine the nitrogen calculations that they submitted. And the plan going forward is to base the nitrogen calculation on existing data for other Island Housing Trust properties, which show actual water use. That would be allowed under the water quality policy. So the applicant did submit a preliminary revised calculation showing that based on that existing usage on other properties, this property would be about 12 kilograms per year over the limit for the property as determined by the MBC. And so that would require mitigation, which could either be tying in or installing other IA systems in the watershed, or setting aside enough land elsewhere to account for that difference. We're still waiting on the data from the other properties, but staff feels comfortable that if that data is provided, that this would be an option going forward. The project will be on town water with an existing water line that will be connected to the rest of the property. In terms of stormwater, we have a drainage plan showing a system with swales and bioretention areas around the site, also underground infiltration chambers. Those are shown here. These gray shaded areas are the bioswales, and then you can see the infiltration areas in this grid pattern. Traffic and transportation. So I mentioned that access is by Meshacket Road. There would be a driveway that loops around the common green area in the community building with access to all the buildings, and then a separate driveway that goes off to the ownership units. There'd be 70 parking spaces with access to all the units. The development itself is designed to enhance walkability and sort of create a community feel. The applicant's latest responses to commissioner questions go into more detail about how that was done. There was an emphasis on walkability, connecting the different parts of the site by paths. Also, retaining as much vegetation as possible, having the development setback as far as possible from the property boundaries, maximizing solar potential by orienting the houses a certain way, and then having porches on all the houses. The property is not currently on the VTA bus line, but the applicant is working with the town and the VTA to extend bus service. So that would also improve walkability in general. We do have a letter from the VTA confirming that they've been contacted, but there's no decision on that yet. And there would be a bike storage area for the community. This shows the parking spaces around the loop road, also the walking paths connecting the different areas. Old Meshacket Road, which is sort of a walking path, is shown here. That's currently overgrown, so the applicant plans to open that up so it can be walked again. And then there would be access to the, pending the VTA approval and working with the town, the bus shelter would be located there, so there'd be walking access there. There would also be access to the south to an existing special way meeting place path, which runs along here. The traffic memo that I mentioned estimated about 270 trips per day for the project and concluded that there would be only a minimal impact on safety and operations. The LEPC authorized a peer review, and we received that letter from the peer review agency today. They requested a few things that the applicant will need to follow up on, including crash data, also clarification of what land use code was used for the trip generation since it wasn't clear, and then also just applying 2017 turning movement counts to develop no build and build volume conditions, which is typically the kind of thing we look at for developments. In terms of open space, again, the applicant intends, the goal is to preserve as much open space and vegetation as possible. There would still be an impact on natural heritage priority habitat. Most of the site is in designated habitat area. So the state will require further mitigation or further conditioning to make sure that the impacts are mitigated. There's a frost bottom habitat on the property to the east, which would not be affected by the project. This just shows the habitat area in green. You can see that contiguous with land to the east and the south. The NBC open space guideline data from a few years ago also indicates that this property is significant, exceptional, or important open space just for further context. In terms of energy, the project will be all electric, which is preferred by the commission. Solar panels and passive solar design, electric vehicle charging stations. The project will also comply with stretch code requirements and Energy Star certification, and go through air tightness testing, which is all indicated in the NBC energy policy. In terms of housing, I mentioned the income restrictions that will be applied. The applicant would work with the Island Property Management Company, Community Builders, which currently oversees Morgan Woods. They would do things like maintenance, housing lottery operations, and that sort of thing. As we would usually require, the units would incorporate universal design features. 2 of the units would be ADA compliant and also accessible for people with visual and hearing impairments. There would be washer and dryers for everyone, is what I understand. Again, the applicant has clarified that short-term rentals would not be allowed. Some rentals would be potentially allowed with approval by Island Housing Trust, but then there would be limits as to how much could be charged for their rentals. I think it's not to exceed, what the owner would need to cover their own costs. These are just a breakdown of the type of units and the income restriction. So you can see most of the units would have a 60% restriction for the rental units, and the ownership units would be at 90, 100, 110% area median income. And that's a breakdown just of the units and the number of bedrooms per unit. So in terms of character and identity, I mentioned that the intent is to create a walkable community. We went through that. The exterior materials are all natural, as far as we can tell, cedar shingles and trim, except for the roofing material, which would be asphalt. These are the elevations provided by the applicant. So this would be the ownership unit. There would be 2 of these. These are the 3-unit buildings on the western part of the site. And then the 6-unit buildings on the northern and southern part. These would be the largest buildings on the site. Community building, again, this would have mail, office space for the manager, and gathering spaces, also bike storage. Proposed bus shelter. So I mentioned that landscaping plan focuses on maintaining existing vegetation and kind of integrating the development into what's already there. So there would be use of native vegetation. The central green would be lawn space. We do have a preliminary lighting plan showing low downward facing bollards. There was a question as to whether the bollards might shine into car windows, and the applicant stated that those would be downward facing, so there would just be a pool of light underneath the bollards. Shouldn't be an issue for cars. This is the proposed landscaping plan. Proposed species. And in terms of abutters, the project wouldn't be visible from existing houses in the area. And again, there would be some vegetative buffering between the development and the road to further limit visual impacts. And that's it. I'll hand it back to Doug.
I have just one quick question, Alex. Is there any pedestrian pathway or sidewalk on Meshacket or otherwise so that people would be able to walk from the site to the Edgartown West Tisbury Road? I'm not aware.
I don't think so. I'm not sure though.
Okay. Brian.
Yeah, I'm not sure, Alex, if you have this information, but you seem to know a lot of stuff. Do you know there's 78 bedrooms proposed here? Do you know what the bedrooms are in Morgan Woods, just so we can have a feeling of, how big these two developments are compared to each other? And secondly, has there been any indication of what the impact would be on additional students to Edgartown School?
So I don't know how many units there are in Morgan Woods, but I can find out. And the impact on schools, we haven't looked at that yet.
Brian, according to the MVC decision on Morgan Woods, which at that time was known as Pennywise Path Affordable Housing, there are 60 units. Any other commissioner questions before we turn it over to the applicant? Okay. Craig, or whoever else you're going to have speak, you have the floor.
Doug,
you.
really quick, Kate Putnam has her hand up.
Okay, I see her hand. I'm sorry, I missed it. So go ahead, Kate.
Should I change my hand color? I mean, you know, Christina.
No, I
suggested
see
that
it.
White
I
wasn't.
see it.
My question is this, I've bicycled Mashakis roads around because of the 90-degree turns between the location of of this development and Morning Glory Farm. And I'm wondering if the town has given any thought to how to make the roads safer for use for pedestrian or bicycles as well as cars.
That would be something, if there's a representative of the town, they could answer that later on. It's a good question. If not, we could ask the town. Go ahead, Jeff.
Just to follow up on what Kay was saying, and yeah, we can look at it later. This, in both directions from this site, there is serious need of the building of bike lanes and pedestrian paths. The town has some plans in the works for the S curves of Mashakit, but in order to make this work, and especially if a VTA bus is going to be taking the curves as well, there needs to be town improvements. And I don't know exactly when we can look at those, but I know they are being looked at and they would be essential to making this work. Thanks. Okay, any other commissioner questions at this point or concerns that the applicant could respond to? The problem with Mashakit and pedestrian safety is that it is, although it very much would impact the viability of this project, it is unfortunately outside the scope of the actual application. But I think it's absolutely worth exploring further with the town. Okay, applicant, where are you, Craig?
Yeah, I'm here. Doug, I'll be speaking. And Madeline, if you could.
Actually,
slide
Philippe,
over.
if you don't mind, I need authorization to share a presentation so that Philippe can go forward.
And Philippe, could you identify yourself and for the record and what you're speaking for?
Craig, you
Sure.
should be on that.
I'm Philippe Jordy, Executive Director of the Island Housing Trust.
Support MD1 Radio through business underwriting by calling 50.
And I just want to say good evening to everyone and thank you, Alex, for your thorough presentation, and to all the commissioners for meeting with us tonight to review this important town-led project. It's 100% affordable and community housing here at Mashakit Commons in Edgartown. Before I introduce the Island Housing Trust's and affirmative investment team who will be making our presentation tonight, which will include the design, development, site design, and affordability and community elements of the project, I'd like to ask Jason Mazar from the Edgartown Affordable Housing Committee to speak to the history and role of the town in what will be the most significant neighborhood of year-round affordable and community housing in Edgartown since Morgan Woods over 15 years ago. Jason?
Awesome. Thank you, Philippe. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Jason. I'm one of the Edgartown Affordable Housing Committee members, as well as the chair of the Edgartown Affordable Housing Trust. And I'm just here to express support from the project. It's been a long time coming for over a decade. The committee in Edgartown is very relieved to see it all coming to fruition. There was a lot of preparatory work going into the request for proposal, which was approved and given to IHT and Affirmative Investments in 2021. And all that preparatory work over the last decade, we have a lot of hope that it's going to allow for a smooth process as we move forward in the development process. There's been resounding support from multiple departments within the town, including the Edgartown Select Board, and the developers have done a great job at keeping an open dialogue as we move forward with the project. It has met the minimum requirements for the RFP, and particularly myself and the committee impressed with the affordability mix, the building designs, the attention to green practices, and I think specifically for myself, I think I appreciate the attention to not only making the housing affordable itself, but also the long-term maintenance cost affordable as well. So as part of and on behalf of the committee, we continue to support the project and do everything in our power to see this overwhelming needed project come to fruition. So if you have any questions for me, I'm happy to answer those on behalf of the town here. And so I think going forward, we think this is a great project and we're strong support of the applicant.
Thank you, Jason. I really appreciate the town's leadership and commitment to this critically important community-based project. And on behalf of IHT and Affirmative Investments, we're really excited to present tonight the progress that we've made since last November when the town awarded us this opportunity to develop and manage Mashaka Commons. It consists of 36 affordable rentals and 4 community ownership homes. I'm joined tonight by Daryl Bazzi, Keith McGuire, and Liz Volchek from Island Housing Trust, and David Ennis, Craig Nicholson, and Madeline Kelly from Affirmative Investments. And before I hand this over to our architect, Alana Jarowski, and Paul Adelman from Union Studio Architects, and Jason Kroll from Horsley Witten, who's our engineer, I'd just like to briefly speak to the well-documented need for affordable and community housing, which was most recently highlighted in the NBC's 2020 Housing Needs Assessment. Concluded that the island's socioeconomic diversity is eroding at an alarming rate, as the affordability gap for working island residents and their families is increasing exponentially due to the skyrocketing real estate market. The report goes on to state that over the past decade, more than 600 year-round homes have been sold to seasonal and investment property owners who can afford median home prices in excess of $1.2 million. In Edgartown alone, 92% of single-family homes on the market are priced above $1 million. That would require a combined annual household income of more than $250,000. So the NBC report recommends an ambitious goal of producing 50 units of affordable and community housing annually. This town-led project directly addresses this critical need by providing 100% affordable and community housing for 40 working year-round island families and residents. So I'd like to ask Alana Jarowski from Union Studio Architects to explain the thoughtful planning and design process that we went through for Mashaka Commons. Alana?
Thanks, Philippe. Good evening, everyone. My name is Alana Jaworski. I'm an architect with Union Studio Architecture and Community Design. And I'd like to kind of briefly walk through the way that the original site plan and the original RFP response came about, which is the plan that you see now, and then walk through how we've come to our current design and what was submitted to the MVC. So the site plan originally was developed with a real desire to create a neighborhood that was walkable, bikeable, and incorporated a real communal outdoor gathering space while disturbing the existing vegetation as little as possible. Our original neighborhood plan really responded to the existing condition survey that you see on the left that we were given during the RFP process, which identified the understanding at the time of the frost bottom priority habitat. Next slide, please. Actually, can you go back? Thank you. So just before we move off of this slide, I just want to talk about the original design. So we provided access to the neighborhood with a single ingress and egress from Meshacket Road through this sort of green buffer zone, which included the ancient way, Old Meshacket Road, up at the northern kind of edge of the site. And that was really important to maintain and connect into the walkability of our neighborhood. We proposed a new bus shelter out on Meshacket Road, which was mentioned earlier during Alex's presentation. And then we included a single drive lane with porches facing outward to really help to connect to the neighborhood and for convenience in terms of the parking. So we had traffic and emergency vehicle turnaround at the very end with a hammerhead turnaround. Because of some of the constraints of the site from that frost bottom habitat, we incorporated a playground and sort of outdoor space connected with a boardwalk across that habitat for the community. Next slide, please. Thanks, Craig. So I wanted to show this slide just to kind of illustrate what that original kind of understanding was. We then had worked with Wendy Colbert, who prepared a rare species habitat assessment, and she identified that the frost bottom area was actually on that eastern parcel, which is the town's wellhead property, pointing out there. And this was what was initially submitted and approved by MISA. Areas shown in green on this plan in this Horsley-Witten group drawing illustrate coastal woodland understory scrub oak areas, and they were considered low to medium quality habitat that were identified by Wendy in her report. Next slide, please. So just wanted to talk through a little bit about the, let me go one farther. Once we received that sort of more accurate data and those constraints that were better defined and better understood by our team, we were really able to look at the site plan and carefully reconsider its response to those areas within the building envelope limits and still maintain that walkable neighborhood design. So we still maintained that initial ingress and egress. And in this case, we were able to really utilize a central kind of communal green space that was anchored at the very end by a community building. We felt like that was very important as a visual kind of connection. When you initially come in to the drive lane, you're met with a vegetated corner, which we thought was nice and provided a little bit of an initial visual buffer before really entering into the neighborhood. It gives a little bit of a glimpse. That green is anchored by a community building, which also has an attached shed for bike storage. We wanted to provide covered storage for people going maybe biking to pick up their mail or meet a friend or a neighbor. We maintained our parking along the kind of inward side in order to provide really convenient parking for all of the residents, but also to limit the impervious surfaces that we were introducing. Jason will talk about it a little bit later, but we did incorporate bioswales as both a stormwater design element, but also as a way to provide colorful planted buffers and really incorporate some of that landscaping in a really nice way. As Alex mentioned in his presentation, there was a combination of homeownership units and also rental units. The homeownership units are those two buildings right there, and they're the smallest in scale. So we felt like we wanted to place them sort of closest to Meshacket Road and then grow our scale up slightly as you cross the site. They also have their own dedicated yard space. So providing them with a little bit of a privacy by utilizing that protected area that you see there kind of in the center. It gave a little bit of a kind of pocket of space for them. But we wanted to make sure that we were maintaining a walkable connection between those homeownership units and the rest of the community. So that walking path, which crosses Old Meshacket Road, crosses all the way through the site, through the central green, and then all the way down to Swimming Place path. I'll note that all the ground floor units are located on a visitable path. And as Alex mentioned previously, 2 units will be fully accessible. One will be a 1-bedroom and one will be a 2-bedroom, and they will have in-unit laundry, and I'll speak to that in a minute. We cited the buildings so that some of the porches could face each other in paired connections, and sometimes we face the porches to be outward facing towards the common green. We did take into consideration the orientation of buildings relative to the solar capacity and to maximize that, while also making sure that we were creating thoughtful connections between buildings and neighbors. So really trying to think about those two things at the same time. I'll speak about the energy goals a little bit later in the presentation. At the 3-unit buildings, 3 of the 4 buildings have south-facing roof area, with one having east-west, and that presents an opportunity for a front-facing porch to the green. The 6-unit buildings also present south-facing roof area, as well as the homeownership units. Programming of the common outdoor spaces was discussed, and we are providing a very large common green that we could program in different ways based on what the residents' needs are, and we really are excited about that opportunity. From our initial proposal with the RFP to this, we reduced our number of building types, which was a consideration around construction costs, but we were also able to design these buildings in a way that they could have varying facades that could really create variety throughout the neighborhood, and we tried to utilize that in the way that we designed all the facades of the buildings. The 6th unit has one central visitable entrance, which is really great. So it really brings all residents in through center and through the back for ease of connectivity to outdoor space, which we really liked. The ground floor units in those buildings would have porches which would be accessed from inside the units, which we thought was nice. It created a little bit of a private outdoor space. We have 2nd floor balconies on those buildings, so 2nd floor residents have their own outdoor space. And then the 3-unit building has both a front porch, which would be used by the units, but there's also a rear deck for the 3-bedroom that's in that building. Next slide, please. You can go past. So we thought we would start with just talking a little bit about the community building we're calling the community house and some of the programs that we have incorporated into that building. We really wanted it to be, as I mentioned earlier, an anchor on the common green space. On the left-hand side there, you can see a shed roof. That's a covered bike area. We're providing mailboxes and package boxes there, outward facing on a front porch. We have the managerial office with a door right there on the porch, which we thought was nice. And then on the right-hand side, those are doors that go into a shared community room with a kitchenette, a couple of bathrooms, and maintenance and some storage space. As Alex mentioned in his presentation, the materials that we're proposing are natural where we can, so cedar shingles and cedar trim. We'll use asphalt shingles and then standing seam metal on some roofs as we need to. Next slide, please. We put this in here just to illustrate that we're looking at all those roofs and the orientations when we're thinking about solar panels and that design. Next slide. And this is just a floor plan that just illustrates those different programs that are available to all residents in the community house. Next slide. These are the homeownership units. As I mentioned before, these are sort of the smallest in scale, a little bit more intimate, using the same materials as the other buildings. Next slide. And in these buildings, we would have some opportunity for some solar panels, and then we're providing washer and dryer hookup in the basements for each of those units. Next slide. This is the 3-unit building. As I mentioned, we have a couple of different facades that we face out towards the green, or we face the porches in towards each other. Next slide. In the 3-unit buildings, and actually it's true of all the buildings, we're providing laundry in the basement for residents, except at the 2 accessible units, they will have in-unit laundry, but all other residents will have access to laundry in the basement of their building. Next slide. Lastly is the 6-unit building. As I mentioned previously, that what is the green door here is kind of a central circulation for all residents. And then there would be porches on either side that would be accessed only for the ground floor units, and then 2nd floor balconies. And then we also have a kind of cross through in that building to an outdoor space behind. So it gives a variety of different opportunities for being outside. Next slide, please. Similarly to the 3-unit, you can see here we're providing laundry, and I'll also mention we're also providing resident storage in the basement, which is nice. It's convenient. It's dry. So we thought that was a good place to utilize some of that basement space. Accessible units will have storage sheds that are accessed from the outside in those 2-unit options. Next slide, please. Wanted to speak a little bit about lighting. As Alex mentioned before, we did have a question, but the lighting that we're proposing are solar bollard lighting. They're 3 feet tall, as you can see here. There was a question just about the light source and where it's pointing, and we included this image on the upper right-hand side just to illustrate that the LED light source itself is actually recessed into the top of that fixture and then points that light down. And that's what's represented in that plan on the left, the photometric plan, those sort of pools of light. We wanted to keep it very residential, light it well, but keep it feeling very residential. Go to the next slide, please. And this is just a nice slide just to talk about color temperature, because sometimes it doesn't get talked about. We wanted to maintain a slightly warmer light that feels very kind of residential. Sometimes those fixtures tend to be in a little bit higher Kelvin numbers and can read a little bit cool and industrial, or maybe commercial is a better word for that. So we're specifying lighting that's 3000 Kelvin. Next slide, please. The lighting that, the signage that we're proposing, it's traditional, it meets town requirements. We looked at Scotts Grove, another Island Housing Trust project, for some of the signage throughout the site, just as a reference, and that's very similar to what we would provide on this project for Mashaka Commons. Next slide, please. And then lastly, I want to speak to the energy goals of this project. So we're working in collaboration with Mark Rosenbaum of Energy Smiths. Many are on this call are familiar with, I'm sure, on the energy goals and efficiencies on this project. There, as Alex mentioned, will be no fossil fuels used at all. The project will be super insulated, airtight construction, and achieving HERS index of 40 or better. And we're actively working on that modeling with someone right now. The design of the thermal envelope is ongoing, and I just want to note that our whole team, our structural engineer, MEP, energy consultant, this whole development team work very collaboratively on how we're designing those details. I think that's important to note. Across the site, we're providing enough solar capacity throughout the neighborhood on both south and east-west oriented roofs to provide the energy for all the buildings' centralized heating and cooling, hot water, ventilation, and laundry. The only energy usage that would not be covered covered by solar would be for individual unit plug loads. So what residents use and plug in to their apartments. And the hope is that that might encourage tenants to use less energy. There's a really direct relationship between what they're using and what they see at the end of the month. All the building systems will be fully electric. So I think with that, I'll pass it over to Jason from Horsley Witten Group.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jason Kroll. I'm with Horsley Witten Group. I'm one of the design engineers on the project. And I'm just going to briefly go over our thought process and the way we went to the design. So the development proposes, as Doug and Alex mentioned, 6.76 acres of the 9.19 acre parcel of land is proposed to be developed, with the remaining 2.43 acres, which is to the west, will remain undisturbed. The site development consists of 8 multi-unit buildings, 2 private ownership multifamily buildings, and a community building. And to minimize impervious cover, we are proposing stabilized stone dust paths to provide access throughout the property, including access to Mashaka Road for the bus stop. As Alana mentioned, solar powered bollards will be provided throughout the pathways. A 20-foot wide single curb cut entrance is proposed, which will lead to 70 parking spaces, including 5 ADA parking 5 ADA accessible spaces. The site will be connected to both municipal water, sewer, and underground electric. And trash and recycling will be maintained with two spaces, designated areas, one to the north and then one to the south. We also looked at the turning moments in conjunction with the fire department to make sure that we could easily access the driveway and through the property. And we found that with a larger fire truck, neighboring fire truck, that there were no concerns with moving the fire truck through the property, as well as service vehicles. The stormwater practices, as Atlanta had mentioned, we have bioretention areas that are both along the western portion and then to the south and also to the north. And then for the larger storm events, those will discharge to underground storage chambers. The roof areas are also connected to, some of them are connected to the bioretention areas. Some are connected to the underground infiltration areas, and then others we are utilizing qualified pervious areas, which is basically allowing the stormwater to run overland and utilizing the existing ground cover. The site we are proposing just over basically an acre of maintained lawn and landscape with another acre of mowed grasses. And this is reflected in the light green areas. As you can see, the dark green areas would be the maintained mown grasses, and the lighter green areas would be a more of a taller grass. The landscape objective for the project was to create a sustainable site that blends into the natural surroundings with native plants and integrating the development into the site's unique environment. The plant palette takes its cue from the existing coastal woodland plant community and incorporates species that are found on site. The proposed planting design includes native plants from the island appropriate species, and the palette was compiled from the Polyhill Arboretum. The walkways and parking areas are surrounding the are surrounded by the native canopy, trees that will provide shade, and the seed mixes that we are proposing are sustainable native mixes to reduce the amount of maintenance needed for open space, but will still provide usable space for the tenants. And lastly, a taller native grass is proposed to soften the edges of the adjacent protected existing vegetation. So this would be an area that would be mowed seasonably and kind of soften the area to provide a buffer to the consistent buffer that will be maintained overall. And I guess the one thing too that I would like to add is of the 6.76 acres that are being leased, approximately 2.8 acres of that land is being maintained as permanent buffers, which will be around the perimeter of the leased property. So along Mashacket Road, it's about 100 feet. Along the eastern line, along the wellhead protection property, it varies from 25 feet to 50 feet. And then along the southern lot line towards Swimming Place Path is about 75 feet of buffer. And I think that's about does it for the civil side.
Need to make sure I'm unmuted. Thank you, Jason. So as you can see, we've spent a lot of time in the design and thinking about the buildings and their orientation on the site to really focus and create a sense of community. And for us, that's focused not only in how we designed the layout of the buildings so the porches face each other so that residents can interact with each other, but also that central green, the community house with its community room and the porch facing that central green. And then also things such as like the pedestrian and bike friendly pathways that really allow for the families and everything else to interact not only within the neighborhood, but access those paths such as Old Mashacket Road and Swimming Place Path. But, beyond that, we really want to develop a situation and a neighborhood that creates a thriving community. And we view that as part of the architecture and the design, but also what we're going to be doing in terms of property management and resident services. So one of the first things we do, and actually this was a suggestion by the Edgartown Community Housing Committee, was to really survey the residents that ultimately end up living here to determine, should there be a playground? Should we have raised garden beds and a community garden? What type of other amenities should go into the community that really are going to meet their needs, rather than us as a developer thinking that, of course, everybody loves to garden and we're just going to create a whole bunch of open beds. So we'll do an upfront, resident survey, get some community participation, really start building those people, building an ecosystem that allows those people to interact with each other and get to know each other. Other things that we plan to do are things like holiday parties or summer cookouts, really leveraging that community house, the porch, the open area to bring everybody together and get to know each other. Because at the end of the day, we're about building a community and a neighborhood rather than just providing housing. And what we'll ultimately be doing is serving a set of people that are income restricted. Yes, they're low income, but they're also moderate income. And when you start talking about income capacities and levels, you really start creating a whole hierarchy, kind of a tiered system of who we're serving. Some of our residents will be in this below 30% of area median income. And a family that would fit into a 2-bedroom household, which could be 3-4 people, wouldn't be earning somewhere around $33,000 a year. Yet they will still not be rent burdened. They will be able to afford it, have excess income to live and participate in the community. And that's the goal there. Most of our residents are going to be in the 60% area median income. And again, that's $66,000 for a family that would fit into a 2-bedroom household. And really what you're looking at there is a teacher, a patrol officer, a couple of medical assistants that service the island. So we're really talking about the people that make day-to-day life on the island possible. And that's who would be living here. We also have a tier in the rental component as well as in the home ownership component that is more of that middle income tier. And we really do think that this is a positive component, because having access and availability and interaction with people that are in a different socioeconomic component than you is really important in getting everybody to understand that they belong in a community. Everybody belongs in a community. And so we have, again, a range from $30,000 to $120,000 occupying the identical type of unit. Neighbors, next door neighbors, upstairs, downstairs, whatever the case might be, but intermingled amongst all the buildings is where these people will go. So there is no low income building and high income building. They're all mixed up. They're all next door neighbors. They're all part of the community. And that's really important for us as well as for the people that ultimately live here. As you can see, when I didn't mention this before and we didn't talk about it earlier, there will be 8 1-bedroom units, 24 2-bedroom units, and 4 3-bedroom units. So 28, as well as these 2 and 3-bedroom units. So 32 of the 40 units will be family-sized units. So that's a very high percentage in the world of affordable housing of family-sized units. So really the focus of this development and this community is going to be families that participate in the community, play on kids' sports leagues, interact with everybody else in the community. So we're really excited about having that opportunity and bringing these people into the fold. And with that, I think we have kind of an open discussion area that we're welcome to entertain things, and folks are I don't know how Alex and Adam and the commission would like to handle it, but we're open to handling questions.
We have a process and we will follow that. First, we will take commissioner questions for the applicant, and then I will see if there is are the members of the public who wish to testify in this public hearing. Fred, you were first, and then Ben.
Okay.
And Tripp. I see Tripp's white hand there.
I just wanted to say that I think you've done some terrific work here And the one area that occurred to me is I was wondering if you're going to be providing any internet connectivity in this development. I think you realize that in the 30% AMI demographic, having a payout there for additional internet service can sometimes be limiting. And obviously we would want families who live here to have their children be able to do their homework from their own apartments. So I was just wondering if there had been any thought to that.
That's a great question. We've focused thus far on ensuring that our solar capacity really helps to reduce the monthly and annual burden of electricity cost to the residents. We haven't thus far looked at maybe a community-wide Wi-Fi capacity, but that's something we could look at.
Anyone who's paid a Comcast bill on this island will be very interested in you addressing that issue.
And I think you realize that there are a lot of families, I know there are in Oak Bluffs, where kids go to the library to get their internet access. And I'm sure it happens in the other towns as well. So it's something that has become very important.
Absolutely. And we appreciate the comment, and that is something we'll definitely look at.
Ben?
Thanks, Doug. I'd echo, I appreciate the thought that's gone into this process. So I have a couple questions on that. The first one is, there's a significant amount of clearing that has to happen to make this work. I think we all accept that. But there's also a significant amount of landscaping that has to be built back in. And you talked a lot about the need for shade trees, and I think that's right. Did you guys conduct a survey of the existing trees to see if it was possible to retain existing vegetation, existing trees within the layout, or maybe minor adjustments to the layout, so that you're not having to rebuild all of that vegetation back? And it's two things. You do save mature trees, but you also save the soil underneath the trees. And so I think that would be worthwhile. I think, in that circle loop in the middle, the common space, is there a way to survey existing trees that may fall into that zone that you could hold on to? Because you're not exactly laying out a formal garden. It is varied. And so I think that may be a future benefit to the homeowners, but a current benefit actually to the cost of the project, to try to retain some of the existing landscape. I noticed there is one cluster that you're holding on to, but I wonder if there was a more intensive study of the trees to see if there could be others that would save. Another question I had is, did you consider doing something different underneath the parking spaces, a more permeable surface instead of asphalt under the existing parking spaces? And then I had a question about how you're going to allocate the solar to each unit. Each unit load will be different. They're different sizes. And how do you allocate the load generated from the solar to each unit? Thanks.
Sure, those are fantastic questions. Actually, one of the things we did is we realized that this common green area is currently obviously native plants and trees and whatnot. What we wanted to do is preserve it as flexible space, so that once we have that resident survey, we could program it for, say, a playground or gardening beds. So we didn't want to come to you and say, we're absolutely preserving this area as trees. We may. I mean, it's a possibility that they say we would love to preserve existing trees more than we would love to do anything else. So that's a possibility for that area. We just didn't want to, calculate it as preserved areas when we did percentages and things of that nature, as we came to you to give us that flexibility if they said we would rather have a playground than trees. So that's definitely one thing that we had considered, and some place that we could continue to leave undisturbed as much as possible while we're under construction, which we would do. In terms of the permeable surface under the parking, that is something that we've talked about and again have considered. when it comes to the application in front of you, we wanted to kind of give the worst case scenario and say that it would be asphalt so that we calculate our runoff and our stormwater and everything else appropriately to size the worst case scenario. So again, that is something we're still under consideration for. I was recently out in California and I saw a parking lot out by a marine aquatic center that had a gravel area, but with a mesh component to it that really allowed it to not be overly compacted, where it essentially became a impermeable surface. So it's something that we've looked at and will continue to. As for the solar, what we've done with the solar, since it is difficult to necessarily allocate it individually to each household, is we've taken a lot of those household expenses and put them on a common meter. So heating, air conditioning, water, things of that nature are on a common meter. So the solar is really going to go to that, which reduces the overall burden to the household and allows us to really spread the solar benefit across the community without necessarily the hardship of trying to individually submeter and create a large accounting issue of trying to allocate percentage wise to each individual.
Yeah, on the parking spaces, I think we've seen this in a couple different ways and methods across the island. The museum, I think, does something similar to what you were mentioning with a gravel under the parking. The West Tishbury Library uses a cobble. So I think there's a lot of different options that are available there.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you guys are thinking about that. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Trip is next, and then Jay, and then Linda. Go ahead, Trip. Unmute.
Yeah, all right. One of my questions is what happens when all the electricity goes off? What do we got here to take care of these people? You got a generator, or, I mean, the solar is great, but there's going to need a little more than that. In the old days, you guarantee a gas stove so they could keep the place from freezing. But what do you got for a good answer there, for a good question?
So we'll have some emergency generators that obviously keep the things such as the sewer pump that's putting sewer out into the main, as well as the community house. So we'll have a central gathering place where people can have heat and cooling, as well as some basic functions available to them in the case of an emergency. Obviously, an extreme power outage on the island affects everybody, and we'll do what we can.
It doesn't affect everybody. Lots of times half a town will get it and the other town will be on. It's very, very spotty. And I think it's a big concern of mine. How is it, do you divide up the cost of the community building? I mean, I thought we were getting affordable housing, and now, gee, we're having barbecues for them and we're doing all kinds of nice stuff. But I don't quite understand, we got to maintain all these places. And is that figured in the rent, or what's the story there?
So the rent is the rent, and the rent is dictated by federal guidelines for low-income housing tax credits and the state guidelines for ensuring that residents aren't cost burdened, which basically means that 30 to 35% of their gross income is geared towards rent and utilities.
But do we pick up the tab for the balance?
No, absolutely not. So we build that into our overall operating costs. So things such as maintaining the community building, any sort of resident services we provide to make this a livable community, factor into what we can accommodate via a mortgage that we pay on a monthly basis, just like any homeowner.
Mm-hmm.
And then we supplement that through low-income housing tax credits, which are a financing vehicle through the federal government as well as the state. We'll have both. And then subsidies through the state via rental vouchers, which we'll have a few of, as well as soft debt subsidy from the state and some fundraising from Island Housing Trust. So overall, we'll be
from the housing trust
component. Island Housing Trust. So the town has already committed $800,000 to this. We don't expect to, at this point, be asking them for anything further.
Oh, and in terms of maintenance, is that, do you think you'll have, where are you gonna get the door to paint the trim and keep these places up in 10 years?
Absolutely. Actually, affordable housing is one of the most regulated types of building and maintenance that you can envision. We get annual inspections from our various lenders and investors. So we are forced to carry adequate replacement reserves, operating reserves. So there's very little chance. Actually, if you look at the history of the low-income housing tax credit, the default rate and the rate of properties not being maintained is less than 5% nationwide.
Thank you.
Great.
So, I mean, is there gonna be one big generator that wired into all these houses, or are they gonna have lots of little generators?
Actually, it's one generator for the community house, as well as the infrastructure to make sure the sewer is happening. There won't be generators for each individual building. It will, if in the case of a situation like that, we would have more of a shelter in place in the community house for our residents.
Thank you.
Okay, Jay?
Thanks. When you look at income as a percentage of AMI, what's the applicant review process here?
Well, on the kind of the macro scale, everybody who wants to live in this development would submit an application. We'll have a local preference, which will be in Edgartown, then Island local preference of up to 70% for the initial lease up. But during that process, they will have income verification, credit rate verification, criminal record verification, all sorts of verifications that any landlord would want to do for a tenant to ensure that they are at the right area median income to qualify for the unit they're applying for, but also able to pay the rent that would be required as well. Again, these are rents that are designed to be non-burdening for a household in these various AMI categories, but it very much ensures that people aren't just moving to the area to take advantage of low-income housing without a job. They would have to have a job. They would need to be, a verified, basically member of the community to qualify as a resident. But they all would be income qualified for both the level that they're being qualified for, whether that's 30% or the 60% or the middle income level. And then also, verified to make sure that they could sustain those payments and be a qualified tenant.
Can we take down the share screen, please, so we can see?
Oh, sure, absolutely. Sorry, didn't know if people would ask for like specifics on the.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we have three more commissioners with questions. Linda, then Brian, then Peter.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is a public hearing, and yet there are a number of aspects of this project that don't seem to be fully tied down. The only one I can give as an example right now would be the material under the parking spots. But there have been a number of obviously good intentioned, yeah, we're looking at that from the applicant, and I think we need more. We typically approve something where all those things have been committed to.
Our plan is to, or my plan is to, it's quite obvious that we're not going to finish this public hearing tonight. And even before we started, my plan was to continue the public hearing to allow the applicant to fill in those gaps and supply the information that staff has requested. We are not making a decision on this until we have a complete.
Exactly, and I think the applicant should work with staff to pin those things down.
I think they are already doing that and are eager to get it done. I believe they have another application in the works that they have to deal with in November. So they are highly motivated to fill in all the gaps. Brian.
Yeah, I just want an explanation of how the affordability works. I mean, I understand, it's whatever percentage of AMI when you first come in. But if 10 years from now, 15 years from now, you've started a very successful business and you're making well above that percentage of AMI, can you continue to stay there? Can you, live there very affordably and go out and buy a house or 2 or 3 houses as rental properties that you can make income from, just exasperating our housing situation? Like what's the process as the years go on?
Philippe or I don't know whether you or Craig would be best to answer that, but I'm.
Yeah,
I was going to throw that one to
I'll-
Philippe for sure.
Yeah. So Philippe Jordy from the Island Housing Trust. Every year people are income qualified. If they're over income, they're not kicked to the curb. And what we typically do with people that are over income is that they would then pay based on their income, 30% of that income. What we do find occasionally, in fact, just recently, last week, one of our tenants is now going to become a homeowner. So as this pool of housing grows, both in terms of ownership and rental, there are going to be opportunities for people to move from rental to ownership, and vice versa. So that's what we would do in terms of management as it relates to people who are going to be gaining more in terms of income over the years.
Well, that raises a question, Philippe, and that is if a substantial number of your tenants are highly successful, and even though they're paying 30% of their income as rent, the project could possibly, to some degree, metamorphosize into less than an affordable housing situation, and people needing affordable housing might not be able to get it. Do you have a threshold beyond which people, maybe they're given 6 months or a year, but have to move on if they become sufficiently successful? I think that's what Brian's concern is.
Right. Well, what this project has in it is that it serves people at many different incomes. So if they do start earning more, then they can go from say a 30 to a 60% AMI apartment, or from a 60 to 110. So there's a lot of latitude from, I think, what we were seeing as little as $30,000 to people making upwards of $150,000.
But my question is, what happens if they start making $250,000 a year?
Well, if they do, then I think we can actually look at the possibility of them moving on to a market rate home. I mean, at that point they could.
But is that my question? Is that your current policy? Is that what happens?
Well, yes, because what's going to happen is that you're going to be paying 30% of $250,000, and a lot of people are probably not going to be wanting to pay that. If you do the numbers, it'd be upwards of several $1,000 a year at least.
It would be 75,000. It would be $6,000 a month for a very
Right.
small space. They move.
Might be able to get more commodious housing.
Right, exactly.
$6,000 a month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But perhaps the market will deal with it to some degree, but it is a concern.
But my question is, for people who are self-employed, are you looking at what their salary is, or what their distributions are from from being self-employed?
Actually, it's a gross income calculation. So it's salary, it's tips, it's income from family trusts, inheritances, whatever the case might be. They have to disclose all of it. Otherwise, they run afoul of the regulations and could be evicted. But as David had mentioned, on a salary of $250,000, we would be expecting them to pay $6,250 a month for their home, for their rent.
Thank you. Thanks.
Yeah.
There's a lot of self-employed businesses on this island, and in my business, I've seen a lot of tax returns over the years, and there's a lot of leeway in Schedule Cs with self-employed people that can really affect what you're declaring as gross income. And I don't see how this your organization could do the kind of due diligence that's really required to address that. It's just, I just don't know that there's anything you can do about it really. But your heart's certainly in the right place in trying to have legitimate incomes. Okay, I'm losing track. I guess it's up to Peter. And I'm gonna have to keep my eye on it. I mean, we're not even gotten to the public and it's 8:26. So go ahead, Peter.
Okay, just quickly, I'm looking kind of at the other end of the scale. When you're looking at people who are trying to qualify on the low end, you did mention, I believe, that you would be looking at all sources of potential income here. Does that include state and federal housing voucher programs? I mean, Section 8, for lack of a better term. Is there a bias toward or against that on the low end?
No, we actually, a housing voucher is not part of your income. Most likely in the situations of us on the acceptance of, first of all, we accept all housing vouchers, whether we'll have some that are associated with the project, no matter what. So anyone applying can possibly get one of those. But if you have a housing voucher through an agency, we would absolutely accept it. The agency that issues that voucher will income qualify them. So the voucher itself isn't part of the income. So it's more the qualification of the voucher that qualifies the income. I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, mine are easily answered in writing. I'll put them in writing to save time.
Thank you. Greg?
Yeah, I guess I'll take the lead from Joan there. One quick question though. Is Old Meshacket Road a special way? Is that correct?
That's not designated as a special way,
It is not. Okay, thank you.
as far as I know. No.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other commissioner questions at this time. So what we'll do is I will at least see whether we have any members of the public who wish to testify. Our process is to always ask for members of town boards who are testifying on behalf of the town board. Is there anyone who has signed up, Lucy, or is showing an interest to do that?
Nobody signed up for this one, but Bill Chapman, the Edgartown Water Superintendent, has his hand up.
Okay, go ahead, Bill.
And Bill, you have to unmute.
Thank you, Lucy, and I do appreciate the commission taking the time to hear me. I did not follow the proper protocol. I realized as I was sitting here, I should have sent Lucy an email prior to. The reason I wanted to address you was that I got this notification yesterday in regards to this public hearing, and did a little research, started looking on the MVC website, went through numerous PDFs to see exactly what was going on, specifically with the infrastructure. And what I actually, with Lucy's assistance, I did find a section in permits, and I saw page C11 and C12 that seemed to be a utility plan of some sort. And I had some concerns about that. I did send an email to Horsley and Witten today, although I didn't know which engineer in particular had done that design. I think I can help that project with a design that will afford better fire protection and better water quality. I have no problem with providing that conceptual design if the commission would agree, and ask the engineer to reach out to me, and I can perhaps help out in that respect.
Thank you, Bill. Jason, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am. Hi, Bill. I got your message earlier today, and I tried to call you, but I missed you this afternoon. So we could definitely touch base tomorrow and coordinate on this. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Okay, and I thank you. I thank you all for letting me address the commission.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, if there are no other people who wish to testify on behalf of town boards or entities, I will then ask if there are any members of the public who wish to testify regarding this application. Lucy, do we have anybody signed up? I bet the answer is no.
Nope. But I'm looking and I'm not seeing anybody either.
Any members of the public who wish to testify about one of the biggest affordable housing projects that's come before us in quite a number of years?
I don't see anybody.
Okay,
Just a reminder to the public, you can turn your video on and wave, you can raise your hand, you can reach out to us in the chat.
okay, then if no member of the public wishes to testify, what we will do is I will continue the public hearing to a date certain to give the applicant,
22nd, Doug.
what is it?
September 22nd.
Okay, 9/22. The idea will be that hopefully, any commissioners who have questions, such as Joan and Greg have indicated, please get them to Alex, and Alex will get them to the applicant so that the applicant can respond before 9/22, hopefully more than at least a few days beforehand, so we have a chance to see the information and digest it. And hopefully the applicant and staff will work to finish up the information that's needed regarding water usage for nitrogen calculation and regarding the traffic issues, so that the holes that are currently existing in in the application can be filled. If at that time there are no commissioner questions regarding the additional information, or no members of the public who wish to testify, I will close the public hearing without taking testimony, but I want to leave it open because these are sufficiently important issues that it's possible we'll have to have further discussion. But my plan would be, barring something I don't see happening, to close this public hearing one way or the other by the 22nd of September. It might be helpful if the applicant is far enough along in the process with staff to make sure that you've submitted your offers by then. I will keep the written record open at least for a week after that, because what we then have to do, and Philippe's painfully aware of this process, and that is go to post-public hearing land use planning review of your offers and any potential conditions and benefits and detriments, and make a recommendation to the full commission. And then the commission has to have a deliberation on all of those issues. And then you have a decision, and then you can go to your next step. And I know you have many next steps in this process, so we don't want to delay you. Okay, public hearing is continued to the 22nd of September. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One down, two to go. Next is Still Point Meadows, DRI number 279-M. This is a modification. It's a public hearing. I'll read the public hearing notice.
Doug, before you start, I'm going to have to recuse myself from this as I am helping this applicant.
Okay, Jim?
Also, this is an interesting one to me. In the staff report, under energy, it states that South Mountain Company is going to be doing work on this project. And that's not true. However, out of an abundance of caution and to protect myself and South Mountain's reputation, I think I need to recuse myself.
Okay. Those recusals will be noted in the record. Here's the public hearing notice. The public is invited to a public hearing concerning the following development of regional impact, DRI number 279M, Still Point Meadows. The applicant is Still Point Meadows LLC. Thomas Benner is the agent. Location, 20 Still Point Meadows Road, West Tisbury, map 22-4, lot 11, 3.83 acres. The proposal is the modification of a previous subdivision approved by the commission, including repurposing of an existing barn for community and educational uses and acquisition of other lots in the subdivision by the land bank. Date and time, Thursday, September 8, 2022 at 7:15 p.m. Place online Zoom with the meeting ID and password in the notice. The application and plans are available for public inspection on the MVC website. Written testimony may be submitted prior to, the website is mbcommission.org. Written testimony may be submitted prior to or during the hearing. Anyone who wishes to attend the hearing is urged to review the MBC's public hearing protocols that are at the MBC website under public hearing protocols. In order to provide oral testimony during the hearing, it is encouraged for individuals to pre-register by sending an email to Lucy Morrison at morrison@mvcommission.org. This hearing is held in accordance with Section 14 of Chapter 831 of the Acts of the Commonwealth of 1977, as amended, and Chapter 30A of the General Laws of the Commonwealth as modified by said Chapter 831. This public hearing will be conducted exclusively using remote conference technology in accordance with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. The applicant, interested parties, and the public may attend the meeting using one of the following methods: using an internet-enabled device with a camera and a microphone. The link is in the public hearing notice. Using a telephone. The number, meeting ID, and password are in the public hearing notice. Okay. Alex, would you please give us an overview of the application and identify the planning concerns? Then we will give the applicant an opportunity to make a presentation.
Okay. So I think this might have been misstated in the hearing notice, which is our fault, but the applicant is Still Point Martha's Vineyard, Inc., not Still Point LLC. They asked us to clarify that.
Okay.
So Doug went through the proposal in general. I'll again just go through some more little further detail, then hand it off to the applicant. LEPC reviewed this on August 8th and voted 8-0 to recommend a hearing. The applicant then opted to go straight to a hearing. At that time, it was a modification. Now it's gone on to a hearing. It is still a modification, but that was the process. We have some new information since LEPC, including response to commissioner questions. We also asked for clearer maps, just showing more specifically where each lot is and the ownership. So that was provided. More information about the proposed uses, which I'll show letters of support. An earlier letter that the planning board had sent to the building inspector in June, just outlining some basic comments. They didn't have any concerns. They appeared to endorse the project. And a letter from the West Tisbury Fire Chief more recently, stating that he doesn't see any major issues, that access should be fine from his perspective. So there's actually more than one lot we're looking at. I'll go through this. The outlined lot in yellow is one of the lots in question that's owned by Still Point, where there's an existing structure. The modification is actually a modification to a DRI that the MBC approved in the 80s, which includes all of these lots, which we'll show. This was the original subdivision plan. It was for 13 lots. There was actually a condition to condense 2 of the lots, so there ended up being 12 lots. One of those lots was to be restricted as for use in providing affordable housing to West Tisbury. That lot was given to the housing authority, which later sold it to a private owner and used the income to support affordable housing development in West Tisbury. So based on that, staff provided a certificate of compliance for that one condition. There are some other conditions as well, including that the only recreational space was to be passive recreation on open space near the Priesters Pond. 2 of the lots currently have affordable housing. I'm sorry, historic housing on them, these 2 lots here. Just to cover a little bit more of the project history, in 2008, Claudia Miller purchased the other lots in the subdivision. Those have remained undeveloped, except for the barn that I pointed out, which we'll see again. That barn had been approved as an accessory structure by a special permit and had been used has been used since then for small arts events and landscaping and maintenance equipment. Claudia Miller sold the lots to Still Point and also to the land bank. So this is the Still Point section here that includes actually 4 different lots. And then the land bank purchased these lots, and these were the residential lots with the historic homes. Poly Hill Arboretum is immediately to the south, and Seven Gates Farm to the north, Crocker Pond and Priester's Pond. This was provided by the applicant, just showing more clearly the uses. Again, this is superimposed on the approved subdivision plan from the 80s. Still Point section here, land bank and residences. The land bank and Still Point sales have already occurred, just to be clear about that. And those happened sort of interdependent of each other. And we can come back to that. So the proposal is to repurpose the existing barn for community and educational space by the nonprofit Still Point Meadows, and also other year-round community uses that will be available for rent to members of the community. There'll be 43 parking spaces distributed along a road that loops in from the main road. There'll be a new public well with Zone 1 protection area. And then a possible future phase would involve a workshop and possible temporary housing. These are the 2 phases as presented by the applicant. I believe phase 2 is still conceptual. I'm not sure if that's actually, if the applicant is requesting approval of phase 2 at this time. So there have been some questions about how the barn will be used, and the applicant has provided a list of possible uses and what a typical day might look like, hours of operation, and that sort of thing, which we'll go through. This states that the barn would be seek approval for classification under use groups A2 and A3. That's under the state building code. And so A2 under the building code includes uses for food and drink consumption, such as restaurants and bars. And then use A3 are uses including worship and recreation activities, including art galleries, lecture halls, and that sort of thing. So those are broad categories that the applicant would come under the building code, just to point that out. This is the proposed site plan. Again, the existing barn is located here. The footprint of that would stay the same. The size would be the same. There would just be some reorientation of spaces inside the building, a new septic system. And then, so the road would come in. This is an existing road, Still Point Meadows Road, connecting to State Road. And there's actually also, I believe, an existing driveway coming back here that would be altered a bit with parking spaces as shown. Each of these spaces here is a parking space. The intent is to avoid existing trees, similar to the parking situation at Poly Hill to the south. This shows the proposed public well and Zone 1 protection area around it. So just to clarify, this is actually 2 lots here between State Road and the barn. Another view, this is all provided by the applicant. So the proposed workshop in the future phase might be located here, but I believe that's still up in the air. Elevations of the existing barn. Those also show the rooftop solar. And then this is the existing floor plan for the barn, which has been used for art events and small gallery events and maintenance equipment storage. There is a small basement area as well. And this is the proposed floor plan. So there'll be some reorienting of spaces. Bathrooms would increase from 1 to 3. And I'll just quickly go through the planning concerns. So in terms of water quality, the project's in the Tisbury Great Pond watershed, which is impaired. The proposed uses would come in under the limit in terms of nitrogen generation per year. Still, there would be a new denitrifying septic system. Mentioned the public well. I guess it should be pointed out that the original subdivision plan would have allowed residential developments on most of the lots in the subdivision, many of which have now been purchased by land banks, so those won't be developed. So future nitrogen wouldn't be generated on those lots. In terms of environment and habitat, the project's also in the Mill Pond watershed, which includes 4 different ponds. The project abuts 2 of those ponds, Crockers and Priesters. There would be, compared to the original subdivision plan, a decrease in habitat disturbance if that subdivision plan had been built out to capacity. There was a survey done this year on rare cranefly orchids, which concluded that the project would not have any significant impact because the cranefly habitat in that area is suboptimal. This shows the Millbrook watershed. You can see Crocker and Priesters Pond abutting to the north.
Just so I'm
Oh,
clear, when you say
yeah.
Millbrook watershed, then it goes into the Tisbury Great Pond.
Yeah, that's what I understand. So this would be a sub watershed. Yeah. So as part of the proposal, there would also be a new trailhead at the front of the driveway, or at the front of Still Point Meadows Road, to provide public access to the land bank trails. There is currently an extensive trail network on the property. There would be 3 parking spots at the front of the road with trail access across the southern part of the Still Point property connecting to the land bank trails. So that would require eliminating a no cut zone on lot 12, which was required in the 80s. Other open space factors, one of the lots is currently undeveloped and restricted. There was also an open space lot on the northern part of the subdivision. Again, the intent is to not remove any trees for the parking spaces. So this is just for conceptual purposes, what the subdivision plan might have looked like at full build out. So you can see these would all have been residential properties. That is no longer the case. Again, land bank has purchased lots 4.2 through 4.8, so those will be undeveloped. These lots have not been further developed since the 80s. Those are the 2 historic homes. And this lot 4.14 is currently restricted, and Still Point now owns these lots.
But Still Point could put housing on some of those lots.
They could potentially.
They'd have to
There would
come
also, yeah, so they've offered that 2 of these lots would be further restricted to only allow off the grid structures. So that's something, at least in terms of energy. The no cut easement is shown here. So that would be removed to allow for the trailhead. And then the LEPC had also asked for the applicant to show other existing easements on the property. So there's a fire access easement here, a driveway easement here to connect to this lot, and then a sightline access along State Road, easement along State Road. Just to cover some traffic concerns. Again, we mentioned access by State Road and Still Point Meadows Road. Staff had a question about who actually owns Still Point Meadows Road, which we'll clarify with the applicant. 43 parking spaces. The applicant provided a traffic impact assessment by the firm VHB, which estimated about 56 vehicle trips in the midday peak hour and 58 in the evening peak hour, and that the project would have a minimal impact. Our traffic staff has reviewed this and didn't have any immediate concerns. This came up at LEPC, and the applicant is willing to provide an easement to the town for a possible bike path along State Road. These figures are provided along with the traffic information in terms of what usage might look like. This is filled out in some other information that they also provided. So the applicant's estimating no more than 100 people at a time on site, and that would be sort of unusual. 40 to 60 people on peak summer evenings, 2 to 3 nights a week. And this is all sort of considerations that went into the traffic. Just big picture, the traffic impact analysis estimated about 274 vehicle trips per day, broken down to midday and evening peaks. Again, the parking spaces. And again, the West Tisbury Fire Chief did not have any issues with site access as proposed. These are photographs provided by the applicant showing the existing access way. That's the barn. It's a dirt access way that comes back to State Road. I believe the plan is to clean up some of the vegetation at State Road to improve sight lines. In terms of uses under the umbrella of economic and social development, the intent is to provide a quiet gathering space for the community that could be used for classes, art groups, retreats, workshops, and other similar events. There's not an intent to have this be like an entertainment venue or for seasonal events. There would be a kitchen space, but not a commercial kitchen. I believe the applicant hasn't yet determined if alcohol will be allowed on the premises.
Will it be rented as a wedding venue?
That's not proposed as far as I know, but the applicant would have to clarify that. Some further factors under economic and social development. In terms of employees, the applicant would expect about 4 new employees, including 2 full-time and 2 part-time. There would be other workers who use the site, but that they wouldn't be employed by Still Point. They would be considered more like independent contractors who are renting the space. The new positions would be mostly administrative in terms of doing the things that are needed to produce the events at the barn. And the intent is to only hire employees who already live on the island, or if they don't already live on the island, who can provide their own housing. There are no current plans for on-site employee housing, but the applicant has stated the possibility of developing some simple cabins in the future for temporary housing. So there's a somewhat broad proposal in terms of what type of uses will be allowed here.
Somewhat.
Yep. So it kind of falls into the category of community building, classes, lectures, and that sort of thing. This was provided more recently, a list of possible activities that will take place on site. One thing that might be helpful would be for the applicant to provide maybe more of a refined mission statement for the nonprofit itself.
Would seem they would need to have some kind of scope of what the rentals could be.
Right. And it could end up being that the decision includes like a specific list of program uses.
Yeah.
I guess this is still open to discussion. Hours of operation would be 10 to 7 every day. About 50 to 60 people, 50 to 60 classes per month are estimated. So up to 720 per year. Class sizes ranging from 10 to 40. Possibly larger crowds up to 100 people. amplified music, and would have to adhere to the town noise regulations.
What are the town noise regulations?
We'd have to look at that. They're stated in the zoning bylaw, but I don't have that on the top of my head.
A kitchen in there?
There's a small kitchen, like a kitchenette, but not like something where you could do like catering out of.
You don't need much to do catering out of.
It would be considered a commercial kitchen. The applicant also provided what a typical day might look like in the summer and the off season in terms of hours and uses. In terms of housing, again, no plans for on-site housing, and the intention to any new employee would be already have housing on the island.
Can we
So I
go back
mentioned-
to that last one?
Yeah.
What are 5 to 10 additional part-time employees who may rent the space?
I
I
think-
think they
yeah.
stated that they were going to be independent contractors. If they are, then the word employee shouldn't be used. And if they're going to rent space, that means they're going to be doing something on their own in the space they rent. So I think we're going to have some clarification on what the scope of that use would be.
Yeah, so those would not be employed by the nonprofit, but they'd be renting the space. So again, the applicant will clarify that. And a lot of the stuff I'm going through now, I assume the applicant has more to say about. In terms of energy usage, so I mentioned that 2 of the lots would be restricted to only off-the-grid developments. The solar panels would remain on the barn. So the heated floor, I think that's where South Mountain came in. I guess if that's not the case, we will correct that. And there are 3 electric vehicle charging pedestals planned for the parking area. We got one letter of concern from Poly Hill Arboretum, just with concerns about potential impacts, including in regard to new staff housing that they're planning to build on their property, and how usage of the Still Point property will affect that, including light from cars and noise from possible events. In response to that, the applicant plans to work with Poly Hill on vegetative buffering once the housing plans on that property have been more fully developed. We also, just to point out, received since the LEPC 12 additional letters of support, in addition to a number of letters that had already been provided supporting the project. So those are all in the record. And commissioners were alerted to that previously. And that's it. I'll hand it back to you, Doug.
Okay. Let's see, we have some commissioner questions and then we'll get to the applicant. Ernie, you were up first, and then Brian and John. Unmute.
I'm trying to, but I keep moving around.
No, you got it. Go ahead.
Can I get some clarity on exactly where on the road this entrance is? I didn't see that on the maps or anything relative to something I might recognize. Is it close to the Arboretum?
It's very close to the Arboretum. If you're driving, you drive past the Arboretum and it's maybe 100 yards, 200 yards beyond that on the same side. The Arboretum on this map is 8.
No, it's right here.
Below it. The Arboretum is also the big lot below it.
Okay, so it's there, and this is State Road here. And so the access is right there off State Road.
So the bridge is, so it's got a very unique entryway. We showed a picture of it a little while ago.
Yeah.
Can you go back to those pictures for a second?
We will have a site visit next week, I believe, on the 14th, Wednesday. No, that's Daggett Avenue, Tuesday at 12 noon.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
That's the
It looks
entrance.
like my car in the driveway. That's what
The upper right-hand corner.
Right.
It's right off the state road.
It's so funny. Oh, I gotcha. Okay, thank you. Thank you. Now I know where it is.
Yeah,
It's
it's
right near the
in
bridge.
between Polly Hill and the bridge.
Okay.
That's
I
quite
I
large.
recognize that fence. Thank you.
Go ahead, Brian.
Yeah, I may have missed this, but what is the zoning in this area? I mean, this is definitely a commercial activity. Is it zoning, is commercial activities allowed here?
It's RU. I think it's residential agricultural.
Yep, it's RU.
So how do they expect to get beyond that or not adhere to that?
I think they're going to contend that they're an educational organization. But that's really, they have to get, they certainly will have to get a special permit no matter what. I don't know if it complies with zoning or not.
Thanks.
Alex, could you go back to the map that shows the lot in yellow just for a second? Yeah, keep going.
One.
Yeah, that's fine. So is it, with the exception of the potential employee housing and the land bank parking lot, which is on 413, this project only actually involves development on 411, but 4, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 13 are all commonly owned. Is that right?
So 4, 4, 9, 4, 10, 11, and 13 are still point. owned by
4-8
Stone.
is land bank.
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't I will just say that I have my biggest concern is what is intended to be provided. I read everything you put up there, Alex, and I would suggest that instead of saying Tai Chi and yoga, that categories of usage would be much more helpful and probably inclusive from the applicant's point of view. And I have a question for the applicant and not for Alex. Perhaps I should wait and you can just store it up and answer it later. And that was, the barn's not intended for quote entertainment or seasonal events, and I don't have any idea what either of those are. So it would be helpful to me either directly now or in a further filing to understand with a lot more precision about what is planned, because if something comes along, I don't think anyone wants to argue whether it is or it isn't. You're all familiar with what happens with the agricultural hall and the, I forget who it is, probably Concom's problem in trying to decide whether something fits within categories. The idea would be that the categories would be sufficiently descriptive that there would not be very many questions at all as to whether something was permitted. So thanks.
And just, I believe the applicant was also planning to give a presentation just to.
Yeah, maybe they could address it then.
But when they do, when they make offers, they're going to have to be very specific about the uses and the uses that will be available for rental, and whether there'll be amplified sound, whether there'll be consumption of alcohol, the sort of things that could potentially impact the butters. Okay, I think Greg is next.
Yeah, so it does say that they do not plan to build employee housing on the property, yet they do plan to build 2 off-grid cabins for visiting teachers, which they consider employees or part-time employees.
I don't think they're saying they may do that in the future. I don't believe that is part of their seeking permission to do that now. They're not providing us with site plans or elevations or anything with regard to that. I think that's another
phase in a
aspirational
sense.
thing.
Okay.
But they'll have to clarify that, Greg. It's a good point.
And Doug, would that come back to us?
It would have to. It'd be a modification. Any other commissioner questions? Okay, applicant, you have the floor.
Hello. Hold on, I'm having, somehow or another, I lost my, can you see me? Ah,
We
here I
can see you, and happy birthday, Attorney Vakota. I meant to tell you that.
Thank you. Good afternoon or good evening, everyone. My name is Marilyn Vakota. Thanks for working with us and working us into this public hearing. As a lot of what I'm going to say, I think will be a repeat of what Alex had presented, but I think some of it probably bears repeating. It's interesting that we're following the affordable housing application because I feel like there's two things that we really need on this island, and that is conservation and affordable housing. So we're covering the former of my two stated important pieces to the island. In any event, before I tell you about what this project is about and what we are going to be doing, let me tell you what we are not going to be doing, just so we get that out of the way. We are not demolishing any structures. We're not constructing any new buildings. We're not adding on to any existing structures. We're not creating any new impervious areas. We're not using fertilizers. We're not removing and cutting down trees. Only for purposes of public safety and access, we will be removing some brush and relocating some trees, but that's about the extent of it. It's really important to the applicant that the commission understands that this has been, from its inception, a preservation project. And it's been in the works for quite some time now. And we have finally made it here. Still Point Martha's Vineyard, Inc. is a nonprofit educational organization. It's a 501c3 exempt organization. And as Alex had shown you earlier, it owns 4 of the 12 lots that were originally approved as a DRI in 1988. Is it possible for me to share my screen? Anyone?
Yep, you just had to ask.
Oh, okay. All right, great. Okay, great. So what you have here is a picture of the barn. And I'm trying to move this, but as you can see, whoops, this is the objective of this nonprofit is education through classes, conversation, and contemplation. It's a beautiful space and it already exists on the premises. You've seen this slide already. This is the Millbrook watershed. Part of our mission in this, in fact, being a preservation project, was motivated by the sensitive location of this property. The green area that you see is the total subdivision from 1988, and the red outline within the green that you can see there is the Still Point property. There is a, just for illustrative point purpose, there is a 2014-18 Millbrook watershed study report that, in that report, it contemplates future use within the Millbrook watershed and nitrogen loading. And in that report, it contemplates 12 homes in this subdivision, which now have been taken out of the calculation altogether as a result of the efforts by Still Point Martha's Vineyard, Inc. This is a different perspective of the Millbrook watershed. In this picture, we're looking from the north, and you can see really well in this picture the 2 residences, the 2 historic homes. There's one, here's the other. And this little slice of roof that you see is the barn that exists on the premises. All the rest of the property here outlined are the remaining lots in the subdivision, which 7 of which are now owned by the land bank, and 4 by Still Point Martha's Vineyard. This was the first subdivision plan that you had seen already. and this looks like I skipped this is the one I was looking for. So this is another perspective of the Millbrook watershed, as well as the division of the property. Just want to emphasize that we are only talking about here today the Still Point properties and not land bank and the residences. But I do want to mention, I think it's worth noting that that a lot of people worked really hard to make this happen over the course of many years. Not for financial gain and not for new development, but to open up new space to the public. This, all of this property was formerly owned by Claudia Miller. She never separated the lots and owned all of the property in unison. She started to list it for sale in 2020, but really what she wanted was a single buyer in order to conserve the undeveloped space. And I think she was cognizant of its sensitive location in the Millbrook watershed. So she offered the property to Still Point MV at a discount if it could find a way to either buy all the property or conserve most of the property. So the task was to find either collect the money for it or find buyers in order to make this work. And Thomas Benna managed to locate a residential purchaser for lot 2 and struck up a conversation with the land bank. In the end, there was one transaction with 3 different buyers that were all interrelated and dependent on each other. If any one of the 3 buyers backed out, the entire deal would have fallen apart and the lots would have been sold off separately. So a lot of people worked together to make sure that that did not happen, and it didn't. In April, the 3 buyers purchased all the properties from Claudia Miller in a single transaction. And as was stated, Still Point acquired 4 of those. The land bank has 7, and the private residence has actually 2. But as Alex pointed out, 4.14, which is where this yellow residences is located, is restricted. So there are also, as part of the interrelated agreements between the parties, to answer the question about the road, Still Point Martha's Vineyard and the private residence owners of lot 2 own the road together. And Still Point also agreed, as mentioned by Alex, to give the land bank a trailhead on lot 12, which was formerly the affordable housing lot that the Dukes County Regional Housing Authority sold. And the trailhead would, although nothing is set in stone at this point in time, but it's anticipated that the trailhead would be located within this no-cut area that's highlighted on this plan, with a trail that runs south and then runs along the southern boundary of the Still Point lots to the land bank lots.
Marilyn, did the land bank receive an easement, an access easement over the Still Point Meadows Road to its land? It must have.
So it has an access easement for maintenance vehicles and maintenance purposes only.
For public access.
Not for public access. No, the public access is restricted to the trailhead. And they can park and the public can walk along the southern boundary to the land bank lots. Did that answer your question, Doug?
It does. Thanks.
Okay. So these are, again, you've seen this slide, but we're keeping the sightline easement. We would like to remove the no cut easement in the original subdivision approval. The fire and emergency easement will remain, although the West Tisbury Fire Department has already approved the road and it wants to keep the easement as a backup plan. The access easement to lot 8 is no longer necessary. And there's an access easement over lot 10 to 11, which ostensibly is gone now because the ownership is unified. So although the road remains there. Again, this identifies the various distribution of the subdivision lots. And how they're broken up. This is just a timeline a little bit, adding color to the efforts that went in to get us to this point. 1988, the MDC approved the 52-acre, 13-lot subdivision. Claudia Miller purchased the property. 2012, the barn was built. In 2021, Claudia Miller offered to sell the property. And in April, the 3 purchasers closed in one transaction from a sale from Claudia. From here, I think I just want to mention a couple of things. Number one is we don't anticipate South Mountain doing work on the premises, although they were part of the construction team that built the barn. So I think that Mr. Veracruz probably didn't have to recuse himself. The vegetation, there has been some vegetation cut already, removed along the sight lines that have improved the sight lines at the entrance to Still Point. There'll be pictures later on that you'll see that the dramatically improved the sight lines, and you can see from the photos it doesn't appear to be any problem with sight lines. And as far as a wedding venue is concerned, there will have to be some private events just to help pay for this, but that isn't the goal here. The goal here is to provide a space for contemplation and quiet activities. So, you know, everything about this project is less intensive than what was originally approved in 1988, with the exception of the number of people coming and going from it. And so because we're doing so little physically to the property, the scenic views, the traditional character of the open space, the habitats, all remain the same. There is a minimal impact on wastewater and groundwater, certainly much, much less than what would have been there had the 12-lot subdivision been fully developed, and even 4 lots on the remaining 4 lots that Still Point has. Overall, the impact on the environment is much, much less than originally approved. So, like I said, the traffic, the cars coming and going will be a little bit more. The traffic study that was done was worst case scenario. So we don't anticipate that many cars coming and going realistically, but worst case scenario was contemplated in that traffic study. You have to keep in mind that this building is limited to 99 people. That includes employees and staff. So it can't ever really house a lot more people than 99. It's not sprinklered.
So that's a fire code limitation.
Correct. That's a fire code limitation.
Are you proposing erection of tents?
So we are not proposing erection of large scale tents. The topography of the location actually doesn't allow for it between the trees and the rolling landscape. It's very difficult to site a large scale tent on any of the lots except for maybe 4.12 has probably the most flat space, but we don't anticipate, there isn't much of a building envelope there or an envelope at all between the sightline easement and the roads district and what will be the trailhead and the easement for the land bank. We don't anticipate using that for tents at all. I do want to mention that Alex talked a little bit about the restrictions as part of the promise to Claudia Miller. Still Point Martha's Vineyard promised that if it receives the permitting for its intended exempt activities, that it would restrict voluntarily lots 9 and lots 12. Let me bring that up. I think I passed it. Okay, this is the 4.13, excuse me. This is the development restriction. So at a minimum, if the permitting is allowed, and that includes MVC permit, ZBA and planning board, we still have to go back to the ZBA and the planning board. We're scheduled to appear at the ZBA on October 6th. But if the permitting is, if we acquire the permitting, then at a minimum, these restrictions will go on lots 4.9 and 4.13. And, you know, to be honest, we've talked a lot about what this might look like once we hit the ground running, but right now we're not clear on what actually will be done on 4.9 and 4.13 or even 4.10. So as Joan mentioned, this review is somewhat confined to lot 4.11, although the entire 4 lots are owned by Still Point, and certainly Still Point agrees that it would come back to the MVC once it knows and has a better idea what it might do on 4.9 and 4.13. I think you saw the earlier slides talking about maybe cabins or temporary structures. But I do also want to mention, and I think Thomas, who I'm going to hand this over to in a minute, can add more color to it. One of the things that struck me was that this property was, everyone worked to make this property what it is and make it available to the public, not just the land bank, but the Still Point property too will be available to the public with a combination of planned events by Still Point, those being in conformity with its mission, and also with other independent contractors who may rent the space that also would need to conform to the mission of Still Point Martha's Vineyard. As I mentioned, there will be some private rentals. Those will be restricted to a minimum. But as I started to say, what struck me was when the newspaper article about Still Point Martha's Vineyard acquiring this property and what it intended to do there, when that came out, Still Point Martha's Vineyard received a great deal of letters and emails asking for the space, all from nonprofit organizations, individuals, a lot of organizations and individuals that are automatically in line with the objectives and the mission of Still Point Martha's Vineyard. So not only is it wonderful to be providing this public space, but what we learned was there's really a need for it. There's been a great deal of interest in use of the space. So with that, I am going to hand this over to Thomas. And Thomas, do you want me to control the slides? I'll start.
That'd be great.
Before we get to Thomas, we're going to, we've got at least 3 commissioners with questions for you. And we're also very time limited at this point. We have another public hearing tonight, and we're going to at least start that. So first, let's get the commissioner questions out of the way. I don't know who was first. I'm going to assume it was Christina, and then Kathy, and then Linda. Go ahead, Christina. It wasn't? You don't have a question? Okay, you got your hand up. Okay, Kathy then.
I just wanted to clarify, Doug, when you asked about the easement, we were talking about a path that went along the border of the properties between Polly Hill and Still Point. And
I was asking whether the land bank had an easement for public use of the subdivision road that goes through the middle of the subdivision to access the land bank property. And Marilyn said, no, they have an easement only for maintenance of their property. But it appears that part of this deal is the Still Point is going to grant a walking easement along its southern boundary, its boundary.
Well,
with-
that's what I want. That was my question.
Yeah.
I didn't hear a definitive. I heard the answer about the other little easements. I didn't hear a definitive. That's part of our
Oh, it's
plan.
gotta be. Isn't that right, Marilyn? That they've granted a walking easement along the southern boundary to get to the land bank property? That's gonna be, that's gonna be the public access to the land bank property.
Okay, that should just be stated clearly then.
Yeah.
Because it's sort of implied, but it's an important piece of the project.
Yeah, it sure is. That's a good point.
The easement, that easement to the land bank is of record. It's already been recorded, and the parking is limited to 3 or 4 cars.
Yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't have bought it without that easement. Linda?
Yeah, this has been fascinating for me, but I am now officially confused about what it is we have to do tonight.
Well, we're not going to finish it. That's for what we have to do is make a determination regarding their application to use the barn. That's all they're asking for, the use of the barn and the creation of the parking space.
And this is a public hearing regarding that.
That is a public hearing regarding that part. That's the modification they're requesting.
Okay,
I don't believe.
but it won't close down tonight.
No, we're not going, no, there's no way that could happen because we're going to have to continue it in just a few minutes without even getting to public testimony if there is any. And we're going to need a lot more. I mean, I think we clearly understand the aspirational aspects of the application, but in terms of the use of the barn, you know, as always, the devil is in the details, as John pointed out, with the conflict that occurs all the time with regard to the agricultural hall. We're going to need detailed proposal with regard to the use. For example, if you're going to rent the barn for private events like weddings, we need to know how often and you know what the hours will be, whether alcohol will be served, whether amplified music will be allowed, because that, you know, that's impact on abutters, and we need, you know, and the direct abutters already asked about that. But anyway, those are some of the issues. Okay, Fred and then Christina.
Just as Doug pointed out, I think it would be helpful for us if the applicant stated that there would be some sort of limit on the number of times that they would allow amplified music during, you know, a month or a week or whatever. Because right now it sort of looks like when I look at it, it says we'll do it whenever we feel like it. And I'm sure that's not your intent, but it seems kind of open-ended. So I think we would feel much better if there was some proposed limitation on that, as we have seen in many other properties.
I just want to mention that the events will be predominantly inside. There isn't a lot of large congregational space on the outside.
Okay.
Had
Christina.
a lot to do with that. Maybe I can shed a little light. Claudia Brown, I did a lot of moving in and out of here. She owned the Point Way Inn and she bought it and turned it over to artists in residence. And there was an awful lot of stuff going on around this barn that was just what they're applying for. Art gallery and all kinds of conversations and book readings and poetry readings. It's, it's already been there.
Respectfully, Trip, it's not relevant to this application. It may be what the history is, but those were all private.
But we
Christina,
were interested in what they were going to do there.
we certainly are. Christina? You have to unmute.
You're muted.
I really appreciate that earlier in the presentation, they showed us, one of the slides had a long, fairly detailed list of project, kind of events, kind of activities. I think I think that was really important to reiterate the intention of this project and of this gathering space. And to limit it so that if anybody complains or, and I'm basically saying the same thing that Doug and Fred said. If you list everything you can think of of the kind of activity or event and the times it would be and the noise it would be and so forth, and how many times during a season, the more details that might be, the easier it will be for us to, if we approve it, to be able to say, you can do all those things, rather than make it general.
But I'm going to jump in here and say that if you put down yoga and Peloton and you forget to put down spin, you're in trouble. So you need to come up with fairly meaningful, descriptive categories of event. And you can say such as, but I think you will be unhappy if you list specific events. You'll be in here weekly looking for a modification.
Yeah, and I want to know what chi running is.
Later.
Yes, later. It's
Okay.
9:30. Hold on. So it's 9:30 and we have another public hearing. Kathy is next, and then we're gonna continue this.
I just want to amplify what I feel like. Saying these events, there will be X and Y and Z, is too broad. I think they have to pare it down to X number of weddings, X number of whatever category Joan is in, children's activities, so it's not specific, but except for the numbers. I'm not sort of concerned, is it hip hop or dances, as much as I am how many of those activities could happen in a week or a month or whatever you want to choose. But there will be weddings isn't okay, I don't think.
We
it
love
has to be
to get
really more structured.
I think some of these questions might be answered if we were able to get through the rest of the presentation. I don't know how much longer we have, but if we can try and make it a little bit further through, I think it might answer some questions.
You know what? We're just going to have a degree of suspense. And something to look forward to at the continued public hearing, because this public hearing's been going on for an hour. We've got 25 minutes left, and we have another public hearing, and we have to adopt a written decision. So regretfully, we just have too much on our plate tonight, and we will I'm going to have to continue the public hearing, and Thomas will be first up at bat when we continue it. And Adam, when can we continue it to? Adam or Alex, whoever.
I'm in my car. Alex, what
October 6th might be the most reasonable date looking at our September schedule.
October the 6th. Then I shall continue this public hearing to October the 6th. And Thomas will be the very first person to speak after Alex tells us what has been added to the record since today. Sorry, folks, but we
Thank
only
you.
got so much time.
Thank
Thank you
you
very
for
much.
listening and your questions.
No, you've covered a
Yeah.
lot, and I think you've got a good idea of the specificity we're looking for, so that we'll know what we're approving. Okay, continue to October 6th. And next is our third public hearing, which we probably won't finish, but we're gonna darn well get it started. And where is it? Here it is. Guess what I'm gonna read? The public hearing notice. The public is invited to a public hearing concerning the following development of regional impact, DRI number 736-43 Look Street demolition. The applicant is BWP Properties LLC. Michael Morrison is the agent. Location 43 Look Street, Vineyard Haven, map 8B, lot 14. It is 0.298 acres. Proposal, demolition of a house built in 1900. Date and time, Thursday, September 8, 2022 at 7:30. Place, online Zoom, meeting ID and password are in the notice. The application and plans are available for public inspection on the MVC website, which is www.mvcommission.org. Written testimony may be submitted prior to or during the hearing. Anyone who wishes to attend the hearing is urged to review the MVC's public hearing protocols, which are at our website under the public hearings protocols link. In order to provide oral testimony during the hearing, it is encouraged for individuals to pre-register by sending an email to Lucy Morrison at morrison@mvcommission.org. This hearing is held in accordance with Section 14 of Chapter 831 of the Acts of the Commonwealth of 1977 as amended, and Chapter 38 of the General Laws of the Commonwealth is modified by said Chapters 831. This public hearing will be conducted exclusively using remote conference technology in accordance with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 2022. The applicant, interested parties, and the public may attend the meeting using one of the following methods: using an internet-enabled device with a camera and microphone. The link is on the public hearing notice, or using a telephone. The telephone number, meeting ID, and password are on the public hearing notice. Alex, would you please give us a brief overview of the proposal and the planning concerns, and we'll see how far we can get. I am going to reserve 5 minutes at the end. At 9:55, we will continue this if we're not done, so that we can go over the written decision in the Vineyard Wind Maintenance Building.
Okay, so just quickly, both LEPC and MVC voted to recommend concurrence. Obviously, so this is the property on the corner of Look Street and William Street in Tisbury. Closer view, there's the existing house there from sometime around 1900. There's also a newer detached structure that would remain. So the existing house is about 2,700 square feet, including all floor area. It's just west of the William Street Historic District, which is a National Register district. The proposal is to demolish the house and build a newer house, a larger house in its place. Photographs, this is seeing the house from Look Street. The house, I think generally could be called an example of the federal style.
It's currently clad in aluminum siding though, right?
Yep, it has newer vinyl siding.
Oh yeah, vinyl siding.
Yep. More or less symmetrical fenestration and hip roof. This is from inside the lot looking back.
Is the front porch original? I can't remember.
So the front porch probably is original. It was, I think the applicant had provided information before that was mistaken about the age of the porch. So the porch is probably original, but it was most likely enclosed at some point after 1900.
Okay.
There's also this little back porch. I think that might also be original, but we don't know for sure. So I'm not sure if we need to go through all the historic significance factors that we went through at LEPC. These are the factors taken from the 2017 demolition policy, which is what this is under because of when it was referred. But I guess quickly, age 1900, no significant people or events other than development pattern of William Street. other homes from a similar time period in the immediate area. Again, federal style, it's a modest building, both in size and appearance. The entire structure is considered historic, including the porch. Again, corner of Look and William. Other houses in the area range from about 1880 to 1980. Wide range of styles as well. Not listed in Macris. Highly visible on the corner of two streets in town near the downtown area. Not subject to other review. Agencies that could condition or deny the demolition. In terms of condition, town assessor lists the property as average plus 10, which is just below average for the town. We also have a structural report from this year that doesn't recommend or not recommend demolition, but points out that there's various water damage and cracking throughout the property as shown here. So the plans for the new structure are to build a larger single-family building slightly farther back on the lot. The footprint would increase from about 928 to 1,300 square feet, which is, I think, a 47% increase. And the conditioned floor area would increase by about 83%. There would be a basement for utilities and storage and an attic crawl space that is not included in that square footage. There would be a front-facing deck on both the first and the second floor, which will show. The height of the building would increase by about 3 feet. We have a conceptual rendering. The building will be solar ready, has a HERS rating of 55, meaning it's well below the energy usage of a reference home under the HERS system. It would also comply with Energy Conservation Code. Bedrooms on site would increase from 4 to 5, including the separate building. Applicant stated that demolition is preferred from a cost perspective, has looked into salvaging, although the entire house likely couldn't be salvaged, at least not by Habitat for Humanity, which no longer accepts entire houses. But there are other opportunities that the applicant is aware of. So this is the proposed site plan. Closer view, existing house in gray and proposed house in black. This would be the porch area in front. So you can see the footprint is significantly larger going back into the lot. This is the proposed elevation facing Look Street. So two deck levels. This is the back of the house. And the west elevation, east elevation. So, and then floor plans, first floor, second floor, all the bedrooms are on the second floor. Basement plan for utilities. So this was the rendering provided. Obviously it's out of context, but it shows what the building might look like. The bottom level here is not going to be open. That will be closed in. There'll be a foundation.
Do you have any photographs of other structures on the block so we get a context of the streetscape? I have the feeling this may not be the consistent with the streetscape.
Yeah, so again, there's a wide range of styles in the area. These are just the immediate 8 properties. So on Look Street and William Street. So they're, somewhat modest in size, styles range. The Look In is close by, which is historic. So these are the closest 8 properties to 43 Look Street.
Mhm.
Then just to go back, so side by sides from what the applicant provided, existing on the left and proposed on the right. These are roughly in scale with each other, but not exactly.
Big houses on William Street around the corner.
So staff went through the 2017 demolition policy factors and assigned a score of 18 out of 32 based on all of the factors that we went through. This is just for reference. Commissioners can assign their own numbers, but this is what staff came up with. In terms of safety considerations, the formal safety inspection was not conducted, nor was it asked for. So we eliminated that from the scoring.
And we had a site visit, yes.
Yep, so I won't go through all the photos, but those are in the record, and if anyone has questions, we can come back to those.
Okay. Are there any commissioner questions of Alex before we hear from the applicant? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Who's going to speak? Is Mr. Morrison, are you going to speak on this?
Yes, certainly I'll start. Excuse me. Good evening to the committee and to the public members that are joining.
And I apologize ahead of time that we just don't have enough time to finish this, but I want you to speak. Go ahead.
I understand. Thank you. First of all, my name is Michael Morrison. I'm the owner of Reveal Homes, LLC. I established that business here on Martha's Vineyard in 2005. I was sidelined with illness 2010, but I was able to produce 11 homes here on the island. Some of them within a mile of where we're looking to do at 43 Look Street. I say this to let the public know, as well as the committee, that I'm just not some off-islander that's coming here to fill up houses on Martha's Vineyard. I have a deep affinity for this island. I spent 45 years off and on of my life here, attended high school, and I respect and understand the committee's policies on the preservation of the island. And through some of the houses that I've done, I've always built with maintaining the integrity of the island and the neighborhoods in all my homes. I've sent some pictures in just to show, but if we're short of time, we can pass those off. Most of my houses that I've done in Vineyard Haven were demolished, were demolitions. Some of them I didn't agree with, but it wasn't my call then. I don't believe the MPC was available at that time. But I put up houses throughout Vineyard Haven, Oak Bluffs, Chappaquiddick, and have always kept my homes and designs within the integrity of the island. In this particular case, I agree on the demolition of this house. I understand and respect its building being built in 1900, the historical significance behind this house. And I think there's other things that kind of outweigh that. I understand without being in macros, it doesn't have a favorable historical rating with historical significance or architecture. It didn't make the cut in the historic district. So there's a lot of things about this house that may not fit where we're looking at a complete historical house. The main concern I have with keeping it here is the environmental hazard that the house poses. It's incredibly inefficient as far as energy is concerned. We have that proven in our report from the inspector that lists the water intrusion into the house. The foundation mortar is depleting. So it's putting the house in more of a hazard long-term. It's not cost-effective through everything that we have to do here, from shifting walls, from the framing, the infrastructure of the house is not sound anymore. That's based on the report from our engineer. So to put money into that, and for the cost of what it would cost to do that, it just doesn't seem feasible. On the other hand, if we keep that house there, all it's going to do is, over time, is just deteriorate even further. It may lower the values of the other homes in the area. And we're looking at a consistent environmental concerns when it comes to the carbon footprint that this house is going to leave in comparison to the new home being a 55 index rated HERS rating, and it's brand new. Any concerns about the home as far as its look or its design, and if it fits the profile of the William Look Street neighborhood? First of all, let's take this rendering in perspective. This rendering is designed to enhance everything around it. This is basically designed to show the viewer that this is what's possible. Our house, first of all, is not going to be elevated. It's going to sit top of foundation. So it will not have the large staircase that goes up. Everything on this house, from the decks and the porches, are all on site. They're not made at the factory. Even the gable end front, the decor there is optional. So imagine this also with the cedar shakes. We're not going to use clapboards. They've highlighted this in a different color to give it a real beach feeling. And I can respect that, and I can respect those that may look at it like that. But when you take this down to level, you put a cedar shake, which we're going to use in the entire house, AZAC trims for our rakes, our trim boards, our fascia, and we haven't decided what type of decking we're going to use. I think it would be a wonderful fit for that neighborhood, especially on the west elevation. The west elevation is that facing William Street. I think that would give a nice presentation as you're coming down William Street and Look Street for that matter. I find that the house is a lot bigger in size. However, we haven't interfered with anything regarding setbacks to request any type of variances. It fits on the property fine. And we're going to join the septic system leaching field. We're going to join both houses, the original house, the proposed house, and the existing guest house. We're going to combine, and they'll be on the same septic system there. That's my presentation on who I am, what I've been doing on the island, and what I would like to continue doing. I'd like to open up the committee and the public for any questions if they have any.
Well, we only have a few minutes. I'm going to ask if commissioners have questions to defer them, because we're not going to finish this tonight. And there are several abutters or neighbors that I know are on this call. So if any of them wish to testify, I want to give them that opportunity. Lucy, is there anyone who's signed up?
So Steve Zablotny signed up as a maybe. So Steve, would you like to speak tonight?
You have to unmute, Steve. You're muted. There you go.
Yes, I have just a few quick comments. One, the double deck sort of banister, second level banister, is not, in my opinion, in keeping with this particular part of the neighborhood. There are other buildings which I submitted to the commission to look at by the same modular company that seem to be a better fit to the kind of buildings that are surrounding it. The difference in square footage on those buildings versus the one you're using as the model is only, I think 600 square foot difference. The difference being in all the other that I looked at and investigated was that the porch was more integrated into the building facade. The way if you walk down William Street, you would see that occurring in many places. So I think the idea of the double-decker attachment is not necessary in my view from an aesthetic standpoint. And I would also wonder about the west elevation, the side that's presented to the look-in. The windows don't seem to have the same significance that they do in the current building. And it's just that it's coming up William Street is a very important view. And I agree. I mean, I have no problem with the old house going away, with a new house going up. I just think there might have been a different selection for the style of this particular house.
Thank you, Steve. And you live on Look Street near
Yes.
near State Road, right?
I'm at the other end of Look.
Right.
The corner of Look and State.
Right. Just for context. Thank you very much. Is there any other member of the public who wishes to testify?
We also had Freddie at the look-in who wanted to testify. I'm just not sure if he's still here. It sounded like he did. Oh, there we
You
go.
are?
Hi, Freddie.
Okay. Are you iPhone 13 there, Freddie, in the corner there? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I've been living here at the Look-In for 42 years at this house because it's right across the street. And for the last 32 years, we've had a licensed bed and breakfast. I agree with my neighbor Steve that when I first saw the picture, I said, "Oh boy, this is the Hamptons." It just doesn't fit at all. But my main comment that I want to make is, over the 40 years that I've been across from this house, the tenants in the house, or the owners, had tenants that were basically seasonal or year-round affordable housing. And I guess as we move forward, I would like to know, is the owner's intent to make this another short-term rental facility? And with that, is this zoned for that? Because we had to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals to get approval for the look-in, and the only reason why we got it in a residential area was that it was grandfathered in because it's been a lodging facility since the early 1900s. So I wonder if you can respond to, again, the use of this house.
Certainly. Is Brian Purdy online?
He's right next to you on the Hollywood Squares here.
Okay, Brian, if you'd like to step in and elaborate on that.
Yeah, sure, no problem. At this point, there is zero intention to make it a short-term rental, Airbnb, VRBO, things like that. The intent right now is either going to be long-term rentals, so yearly rentals, or it's possibly going to be sold. But at this point, what I want to do is I'd like to make it year-round rental, so that people can actually use the place, preferably islanders, to live there. That's the thinking right now.
Thank you,
That's the
Brian.
thinking now, but later?
I don't have any intention whatsoever to make it short-term rentals like Airbnb and things like that. I don't ever see that happening. The
Doug,
only other
Doug, I don't
possibility
think
is
that's what's in front of us.
Right, it's not, but it's, okay, well, the question's been answered, and I'm going to, because of the time and because I've left all of Chairman Malcolm 3 minutes to do the written decision. I'm going to continue this public hearing. Hopefully, we'll be able to wrap it up very quickly next time, but we just don't have time tonight. Alex, what date do we have?
Again, I think October 6th. Yeah.
That's what we'll try to do. October the 6th. Any member of the public who is here and I haven't had a chance to call on you, please come back on October the 6th. We're going to wrap this up that day, I hope. Actually, no, I'm very confident we'll be able to. This shouldn't drag on. Members of the commission, if you have questions for the applicant or for Alex or anything at all that you need answered on this application, please send an email to Alex so he can get it to the applicant and we can get it sorted out and have the information in advance of October 6th. Okay, this public hearing is continued to October 6th. And now, Joan, you have a minute and a half. You got to unmute.
I will accept a motion to continue for what, about 10 minutes, Jim?
Yeah, 10 minutes, hopefully.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
All in favor, raise your hand. All opposed, raise your hand. No hands. Okay.
Oh, Ernie opposed it. He always does.
Oh, Ernie. Okay, one opposed. Jim, up to you to take us through the written decision, please.
I'm having computer issues, so if I freeze out, someone else is going to have to step in. So we should bring the written decision up. I hope everyone's read it. And if there's any issues as we're going through it, say stop or give a line number.
I realized that the version I sent out might not have had line number, so section number would do
Whatever, yeah.
And some of the administrative info just has to be filled in, but that's all just information.
This is the wind maintenance building in Tisbury.
Right.
Okay, so you just scroll through it, and if there's any issues, please stop Alex.
Yep.
Or if anyone knows a specific place where they have an issue, let me know.
I have one, but it's a ways down still. But it's a way down. Yeah, it's page 11.
Not much meat left at page 11.
It's a condition.
Let's
Condition
go-
number
let's go
7.
slow at the conditions. Alex, can we go back and go slowly at the conditions there? Oh, next page.
Mhm.
Alex, you had that highlighted. Is that because you,
Thought that someone reading this condition in the future might not know that. It wasn't part of the condition as approved, but I mean, do you think we need that or should we take it out?
I think it's good information to have.
I'd leave it.
yeah,
Do we somewhere also define FTE?
Full-time employee. Yeah, it's right above it.
Three lines up, yeah.
Yep, good, I see it.
A lawyer would insist that FTE be in quotes when it's in the parens. But let's ignore that.
some lawyers.
Okay, so in condition number 7,
Okay,
where it says including the securing of commitments for similar rights from property owners to the east and south of the project. I think we should say something like including their best efforts towards securing.
uh,
Well, no, I think
no,
wasn't that condition basically contingent on the town and MVC
yes,
acquiring, similar rights. So, I mean, they're not going to open it up unless everybody plays ball.
No, but Doug, what it says here is the applicant is going to help, is securing
No,
the
I don't think
rights.
that's it. No, I think it's including securing the commitments is on the MVC and the town of Tisbury. The applicant doesn't have to lift a finger about that.
That all that should just be struck. I mean, this is a condition for the applicant, not,
Right, that's what it looks like we're asking the applicant to secure those commitments.
Yeah, but
That's my problem.
but the applicant's making available to the public is conditional on the whole route being available to the public.
But
I
that's a
don't believe
moot
it
point.
says that.
Well, then it just needs to be rephrased so that it says that.
please.
Why don't you simply say, subject to the MVC and the town of Tisbury further developing a proposal for and securing,
No,
Yes, that's right. Just take out
so
the,
take out that little phrase there.
yeah, and secure.
And securing blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
That's better.
yeah. That's a good catch, though. It needs to be clarified.
And can I just add, MVC doesn't have to be part of that.
No,
It's just a town.
correct.
I don't mind the MVC being part of that as we see different applications potentially in front of us at the MVC level in the town. I mean, I think it's a joint effort.
Yeah,
But if someone comes in, they don't need MVC review.
Well, then they're just talking to the town.
Make
Yeah.
it and or, make it just and or,
Yeah.
so that's more flexible.
Whatever.
You might say the. Or the. Whatever. That's fine.
Moving right along.
Is that good?
Oh, sorry, I'm not supposed to say anything.
That's okay. I don't believe you touched on anything delicate there.
Does your mute button even work, Joan?
Oh, just barely.
You mean on Zoom or something else?
Tough crowd.
Oh,
Excuse me, the applicant also asked for some clarification. It says no outside storage. They asked for, could they store things outside for a day or two as they sort of move it? That's number 6. We never discussed it, but they wanted to.
I think that's from a practical standpoint, nobody is policing anybody, over a day or two. But if they suddenly have a container out there for 6 months, we're gonna be interested.
Okay, thanks, Ben.
could we clarify it by saying no long-term storage?
Nice point, yeah. Whatever
fine.
it means.
That's good.
Maybe stored out long-term outside. Outside long-term, whatever.
Right. I mean, because they have a fairly large dock area out there, and it's not beyond the realm of possibility that they would leave things on the dock.
Yeah, where they're gonna store stuff outside is over
Right.
at the docks down the street.
They'll stare it out at the airport in this hangar.
They're going to store it in all those places.
Okay,
With the helicopters.
okay, let's finish.
3 more minutes.
That's it. Everything else was standard.
Move to approve as clarified.
Second,
Linda, you had a question?
Well, I had a comment way back when we were looking at an estimate by some state agency of flooding. It said in the future, there may be a 20, I don't know what it said. I gotta tell you,
10.5 it said.
when it rains, it floods down there. You can guarantee it.
Right, that's
Yeah.
why it's in the flood zone.
Yeah, but it says, according to state projections, the area currently has about a 25 to 50% annual chance of flooding. It floods whenever it rains hard.
Yeah, but
Period.
that is a function of the topography, and this is an issue with regard to, predictions of weather predictions, and they're gonna, they can't. I know your point. Yes,
Those state, that's for flooding from the sea, not from rain, the predictions by FEMA.
Well, I just couldn't let it pass without commenting because it's almost a joke in our family that, it's gonna flood down there.
You have to bring a kayak on your car when you go in order to get to Hinckley sometimes.
We had a motion and a second. Richard,
Yeah.
do you want to address the motion, or is this before that?
Before that, just one quick question along with stormwater, because we're going to be raising the elevation. There's no way that we can say that they are going to mitigate the impact of their neighbors left and right. Raising the elevation of that could flood, Aki Tree or the Mobile, but there's nothing we can really do about that. Correct?
The building code restricts you from sending your stormwater onto your abutting property. So that will have to be mitigated in the way they raise the property. And if it becomes a problem, then the building inspector is going to force them to fix it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion on that? All right, I guess we can vote.
All right, Doug Cedarholm,
Yes.
Christina Brown,
Yes,
Jeff Agnoli,
Yes.
Greg Martino,
Yes.
Ben Robinson,
Yes.
Jim Vercruz,
Yes.
Brian Smith,
Yes.
Jay Grossman,
Yes.
Linda Sibley,
yes,
Ernie Thomas,
Yes.
Fred Hancock.
Yes.
I think that's it. Great.
All right.
Trip.
Trip, you're ineligible. You missed the deliberation on August 25th.
I was in the hospital.
welcome back.
Yeah.
Glad you're feeling better.
Was up on that thing.
All right, we're 10:10. I guess that's it.
I like Carlos's sweater. I'm enjoying that.
Where is he?
Down in the left-hand corner on my screen. Thank you very much, Jim, for taking over. Thanks. That's it for tonight, guys. See you in 1 week.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night, all. Mm.
Night, everybody.
Good night, Lucy.
Thanks, Lucy.
No problem.